On April 4, 2010, in Texas, Robert Frisbee went to the police station because he could not find his 17-year-old daughter, Bridget Randall Frisbee. He had assumed she was spending the night at a friend's house, but when she failed to return home the next morning, his concern grew. Robert tried to call her several times, but every attempt went straight to voicemail. With no answers and growing fear, he decided to report her missing. Bridget was born on December 17, 1993. Not much is publicly known about her earliest years, as she spent them in an orphanage before Robert and his wife, Catherine, adopted her when she was just 18 months old. Bridget grew up as a bright, energetic, and curious young woman. She loved writing poetry, painting, and horseback riding. But tragedy had shadowed her life from a young age. At only 6 years old, she lost her mother, Catherine, who passed away after a long illness at the age of 49. The loss was devastating for both Bridget and Robert. As a single father, Robert did everything in his power to give his daughter a happy life. They shared a warm and trusting bond, though as Bridget grew into her teenage years, a streak of rebellion sometimes strained their relationship. On the evening of April 3, 2011, a group of teenagers riding dirt bikes through the woods on the outskirts of Katy, Texas, came across something unsettling. Among the trees, they spotted what looked like a body lying on the ground. As they drew closer, their fears were confirmed. It was a young woman, clearly dead and abandoned there for some time. Horrified, they immediately contacted the police. When officers arrived at the scene, they quickly concluded that the spot where the teenagers found the body was also where the victim had been killed. The young woman had no identification on her, and detectives had no idea who she was or how she ended up in the woods. One of their first priorities was to establish her identity. Based on her appearance, she looked to be around 20 years old. The medical examiner's initial review revealed a single gunshot wound to the back of her head. The bullet had gone straight through, with an exit wound in her forehead. Next to the body, investigators found a spent 9mm shell casing. At that moment, it was the only tangible clue pointing toward the killer. As they combed through the area, investigators noticed another odd detail: a small hole in the ground just a few yards away. It looked as if someone had dug into the earth, but the purpose remained a mystery. Was it connected to the crime, or just a coincidence? Police began canvassing the neighborhood for answers. The wooded area was usually quiet, and the news of a brutal killing nearby left residents shaken. Officers knocked on doors, asking if anyone had noticed strange cars, familiar faces, or anything unusual in the past 24 hours. Most had not, but one woman recalled something odd. At around 2 or 3 o'clock a.m., while outside with friends in her backyard, she heard a loud noise, something that sounded like a gunshot. At the time, they brushed it off and didn't call the police. But in hindsight, after learning a body had been found, it seemed chillingly significant. This gave detectives an approximate time frame for the murder, sometime between 2 and 3 in the morning. Still, without a name for their victim, investigators were working in the dark. In most homicide cases, the victim and perpetrator are somehow connected: friends, family, lovers, or rivals. Identifying the woman was the key to unlocking the rest of the case. Detectives sifted through missing person reports, hoping for a match, but none fit the description of the young woman found in the woods. The next day, April 4, 2011, Robert Frisbee walked into the police station, deeply worried after hearing news reports about a young woman found dead in the woods, whose identity remained unknown. His 17-year-old daughter, Bridget, hadn't returned home, and he had been unable to reach her. Robert told detectives he had last seen Bridget 2 days earlier and assumed she had stayed overnight with a friend. Now, his worst fears came true when investigators showed him photos from the crime scene. He instantly recognized his daughter, a discovery that left him shattered. Years earlier, he had lost his wife, and now he had also lost his only child, the daughter he loved so much. With her identity finally confirmed, investigators hoped they were one step closer to finding her killer. Detectives asked Robert to recount in detail the last time he saw Bridget and what had happened in the days leading up to his report. Robert explained that he last saw Bridget on April 2, 2011. That day, he had bought her a new rave outfit, turquoise faux leggings, a skirt, and a matching top. That evening, Bridget's friend, Kendall Suto, came over for dinner. Later, Robert drove the two teenagers to a rave, but the venue was closed, so they returned home shortly after 10 o'clock p.m. Since Kendall's ride wasn't supposed to pick him up until midnight, he and Bridget settled in to watch a movie. Bridget was still wearing her rave outfit when Robert went to bed, setting his alarm for midnight so he could lock up after Kendall left. When Robert woke up, Bridget told him Kendall's ride hadn't shown up yet. He returned to bed, but when he got up again around 3 o'clock a.m., the back door and garage door were both open. He locked up so Bridget couldn't sneak back in without his knowledge. That's when he realized Bridget's cell phone was gone. Since Bridget's own phone had been taken away as punishment, he suspected she had taken it before leaving the house. Robert repeatedly called his phone and even tried to track its GPS, but with no success. The next morning, he called several of Bridget's friends, but none of them knew where she was. On the evening of April 3, he came across an online news report about a body discovered in the woods. Fearful that it could be his daughter, Robert decided to contact the police the next day. From Robert's testimony, detectives identified their first potential suspect, Bridget's friend Kendall, who had been at the Frisbee home that night and was likely the last person to see her alive. Robert, however, told police he did not believe Kendall would harm his daughter. He insisted that if anyone had a personal motive, it would be Bridget's ex-boyfriend, Jonathan, with whom she had a troubled and volatile relationship. Investigators also took note of Zach Richards, Bridget's current boyfriend, as another person of interest. They now needed to determine the whereabouts of all three young men on the night of the crime. The first person they interviewed was Kendall Suto. He had no criminal record and willingly agreed to speak with detectives. Kendall admitted he had watched TV with Bridget on the night she disappeared, but said he left shortly after Robert went to bed. He denied any involvement in Bridget's death, insisting they were close friends and he had no reason to hurt her. Kendall expressed his willingness to fully cooperate with the investigation. He also mentioned that Bridget had been visibly upset that evening after an argument with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Their relationship had lasted several months, but was turbulent, leading to repeated fights and eventually a breakup. Police were able to verify Kendall's alibi, but even so, they could not completely rule him out. With no clear answers, the case remained wide open. Investigators had heard Jonathan's name more than once, so they decided to pay him a surprise visit, hoping to catch him off guard. But when they arrived at his house, the scene was unsettling. The place was empty, abandoned in a hurry. And then came the shocker. The front door and walls of the home were riddled with bullet holes. Neighbors revealed that only 3 weeks earlier, on March 14, the Larson family's house was attacked in a shooting. Miraculously, no one was injured. Jonathan had reported the incident, but the case went nowhere. Soon after, the Larson family packed up and left, saying they no longer felt safe. Now the detectives wonder if the shooting is related to the Bridget Frisbee's brutal murder, who has been discovered on April 3. The timeline was eerily close. Larson, her ex-boyfriend, immediately rose to the top of their suspect list, searching for answers. Police visited the high school both Bridget and Jonathan had attended. Administrators told them that Jonathan had been absent for days. Investigators then turned to Bridget's classmates, probing for enemies or hidden conflicts. One student, Alexander Olivieri, described himself as Bridget's friend, saying Jonathan Larson was the only one with a real motive. But Olivieri's own story drew suspicion. He admitted that he and a friend, Alan Perez, had plans to meet Bridget on the night of her death. According to Olivieri, he and Perez showed up at Bridget's house, but she never appeared. Hours later, around 5 a.m., they returned. Still no sign of her. With this new lead, investigators expanded their list of suspects. Now, alongside Jonathan Larson, they were eyeing Alexander Olivieri and Alan Perez. Detectives discovered that Jonathan's mother had not left the city after the drive-by shooting. She had moved into a friend's apartment temporarily. During a conversation with investigators, she said she had sent her son to live with relatives in Austin, Texas. After the incident, she stated that her son often got into trouble and she was sure their house had been targeted because of him. In her opinion, that incident was revenge on her son. She also said Jonathan had fought with another guy shortly before the drive-by shooting, and she was sure there was some connection between the fight and the shooting at their house. Her relationship with her son was far from ideal, and she did not know where Jonathan was at the time of Bridget's death. She gave the officers the address of her relatives in Austin, where she said Jonathan was supposed to be. The turning point in the case happened before Jonathan was found. A lawyer representing the Perez family contacted the police. He stated that Alan Perez, his client, possessed crucial information regarding Bridget Frisbee's death. Investigators recognized the name Alan Perez from their conversation with Bridget's classmate, Alexander Olivieri, who mentioned going to Frisbee's house with Alan Perez. Now, Alan was willing to share what he knew, but only if he received immunity from prosecution. Desperate for information, the authorities agreed to his terms. Alan Perez revealed that there was a direct connection between the drive-by shooting at Jonathan Larson's house and the death of Bridget. The shooting occurred just a week after Bridget had broken up with Jonathan. According to Perez, the person who carried it out was 17-year-old Alexander Olivieri. Perez and Olivieri had met in high school and later joined the National Guard together. But when Olivieri returned from basic training, he transferred to another school, where he became friends with Bridget. Perez testified that Bridget bragged to another friend about the shooting. Specifically, Bridget said that she drove the car while Olivieri shot at her ex-boyfriend's house with his Yugo semi-automatic rifle. With the future of joining the National Guards, Olivieri feared that the scandal of the shooting would adversely affect his career. Perez testified that on the evening of April 2, 2011, Olivieri asked him for a favor. Olivieri wanted Perez to be there for support and told him to bring a weapon. Perez brought a .380 caliber pistol, a green military uniform mask, and gloves. Olivieri had his own weapon, a 9mm Beretta pistol in a shoulder holster under his jacket. Perez said they met up after midnight at Olivieri's house. From there, Olivieri phoned Bridget, asking her to ride with him to pick up her boyfriend, Zach Richards, from the bus station. Olivieri then suggested they drive to her house. He instructed Perez to hide under a blanket in the back of his Suburban, explaining that he wanted to lure Bridget into the car without realizing Perez was there. When they arrived, Olivieri started talking to Bridget, saying he needed to help dig something. At first, she didn't want to help, but she finally agreed. She got in Olivieri's car. Perez still hid at the back of a blanket. Olivieri drove to the same neighborhood where he and Bridget had previously made a shooting when driving. He got out of the car with Bridget, carrying a shovel, and a flashlight. When Bridget bent down to dig, Olivieri pulled out the pistol, pressed it behind her neck and fired. Perez was shocked because he thought Olivieri might threaten her or poke her with the gun. But instead, he had simply shot her. Panicked, Perez cursed at him, but Olivieri ordered him to be quiet and run back to the car. Olivieri then retrieved the shovel, flashlight, and Bridget's cell phone before returning to the vehicle. They left the scene and drove to Perez's house. Along the way, they smashed Bridget's phone with a shovel to destroy evidence. According to Perez, he and Olivieri went to pick up Bridget's boyfriend, Zach Richards, at the bus station at about 4 a.m. Perez invited Richards to stay the night at his house, so the three of them drove to Perez's house and went to bed. They didn't tell Richards anything about the crime. Olivieri told Perez they needed to lie for each other to the police and pretend they were together if asked about the crime. That he stayed at Olivieri's house, hung out, watched a movie, and then they went to pick up Richards together. Olivieri convinced him they would be in no danger if they said the same thing and provided each other with an alibi. Olivieri also told Perez that he would escape the gun he used to kill Bridget. On the day of the shooting, Bridget was angry because Jonathan cheated on her. Olivieri offered to retaliate by shooting at Jonathan's house. However, Bridget then told others about the shooting, making Olivieri worried. He feared this would ruin his ambition to join the military. To protect her future, Olivieri decided to make Bridget forever silent by killing her. While investigating this case, the police heard the name of Zach Richards, Bridget's boyfriend, mentioned several times. Therefore, they decided to speak with him. They wanted to determine if Richards would corroborate Alan Perez's testimony or if Perez was attempting to absolve himself of responsibility. The situation seemed very confusing. Richards testified that in March 2011, Bridget told Richards that Olivieri had shot at her ex-boyfriend's house from her car while she drove. Olivieri claimed he participated in the drive-by as a favor to Bridget and simply because he could. Richards testified that Bridget kept bragging about the shooting, and Olivieri angrily confronted her, telling her to stop telling people. On April 3, 2011, Olivieri had agreed to take Bridget to the Houston bus station to pick up Richards at approximately 1 a.m. Olivieri finally arrived several hours late, and Perez was with him. When Richards asked about Bridget, Olivieri said he had tried to contact her and went by her house, but she wasn't there. According to Richards, he went to Bridget's house after sleeping for a few hours. Her father answered the door and said that Bridget had been out all night, that he did not know where she was. Richards tried to locate her through friends over the next couple of days until he heard the news about the discovery of her body. Richards told the investigators that he had previously been in the woods, which had now become a crime scene, with Bridget and Olivieri. According to him, this area was familiar to Olivieri, and Olivieri always carries weapons with him. 4 days after Bridget's death, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Olivieri. Given that he owned several types of weapons and was skilled in handling them, the police requested the Special Weapons and Tactics Team's assistance in arresting him. After the surveillance team confirmed that Olivieri was home, they initiated their operation. Fortunately, they did not have to use weapons. He surrendered without resistance. He was calm and showed no emotion. He understood why he was being arrested, but denied any involvement in the death of Bridget Frisbee. Alexander's father, Samuel Olivieri, consented to the search of the house and car. The police found an instruction manual for a 9mm Beretta pistol. It matched the shell casings found at the crime scene. In Olivieri's Suburban, police recovered a blanket, a shovel, rifle, and shotgun shell casings, as well as trace evidence samples, including fibers from the passenger seat and floorboard. Ballistics testing revealed that the shell casings from the Suburban matched the shell casings recovered from the drive-by shooting at Larson's house. Fibers lifted from the passenger seat of the car matched Bridget's new rave faux fur outfit that she was wearing when her father last saw her on the night of April 2nd. During the trial of Alexander Olivieri, he claimed that he did not see Bridget the night she disappeared. Olivieri's defense argued that the fibers found in their client's car, which matched the fibers of Bridget's new rave faux fur outfit, ended up there a few weeks before her death, but this version failed to convince the jury. Robert Frisby provided a statement from his credit card company which proved that Bridget's outfit was purchased on April 2nd. 2011. She died a few hours later. This indicated that Bridget was definitely in Olivieri's car before her death, which meant he was lying when he said he hadn't seen her that night. The court saw a video that appeared on YouTube in 2010, about a year before Bridget's death. It was called Me and My Beretta 9mm and showed Alexander Olivieri firing various weapons, including a Beretta pistol. Alan Perez testified at the trial that the video showed the same gun that Olivieri used to kill Bridget on August 1, 2012. The court sentenced Alexander Olivieri to 60 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 30 years. But Robert believes Olivieri will be behind bars for at least 50 years. Robert Frisby said, "It's important this man is off the street, and he needs to stay off the street for the rest of his life."
Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kirk Langford. Masumi was born in the Japanese town of Sado to parents Hichi and Fiko. She has two older brothers, Kenya and Rio. Masumi grew up in a loving and supportive family, did well in school, earned good grades, and was well behaved. In her 20s, Masumi visited Hawaii for the first time with her family and immediately fell in love with the island after returning home. She decided to visit again the following year. In 2007, although her parents were initially reluctant to let her travel alone due to safety concerns, they eventually realized how important the trip was to her and agreed to her plan. At the age of 21, Masumi packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and boarded a plane to Hawaii. She planned to stay for about 2 months and wanted to make the most of her time there. Her goals included improving her English and volunteering at Sunset Beach Elementary School, located nearby on the island of Oahu. During her time there, Masumi also enjoyed reading and studying history at the local library. Masumi was quite petite, and due to her astigmatism, she had to wear special glasses. She was a kind and somewhat naive girl, which could have made her an easy target for criminals. However, she did not feel any danger. Instead, she felt extremely comfortable living in Hawaii. As the weeks passed, Masumi's trip was filled with unforgettable joy. However, her vacation was coming to an end while she looked forward to reuniting with her loved ones. She also realized how much she would miss this sunny paradise and how long she would have to wait until her next visit on April 12, 2007, around 9:30 a.m. One of Masumi's friends dropped her off at the end of the road. And, as usual, Masumi decided to go for a walk. The area was not too isolated, so she felt safe. She walked along the road toward the home of her family friend, Yumi, with still half a mile to go. After 2 hours had passed without Masumi returning to house, Yumi's family began to worry. Yumi and her husband went looking for Masumi, but after searching the entire road without finding her, they felt that something was wrong. The couple called the police to report Masumi missing. The news quickly spread across the islands, and eventually, family friends notified Masumi's parents in Japan. Local residents soon organized a search effort. Masumi's small stature and limited English skills make her stand out, but they also make her more vulnerable to danger. The investigation began at the house where she was staying. Although nothing suspicious was found, experts collected DNA samples as a precaution. No clues were discovered. Her suitcase and plane ticket back to Japan were found on the table. As news of Masumi's disappearance spread, Many people came to the police station with potential information about her whereabouts. A local resident provided a crucial piece of information, reporting that she had seen a young woman matching Masumi's description that morning. A man had tried to persuade her to get into a truck, but she repeatedly refused. The witness also recalled that the truck was white, which became a key detail in the investigation. Witnesses began searching the area for white trucks and checked the island's vehicle database. During this process, a second witness provided a similar account, adding that the truck had a company logo on its body. Fortunately, the man even remembered the name, Howoli Pest Control. This information significantly narrowed the search area. Police then identified the suspect as Kirk Langford, a technician for Howoli Pest Control. He was born in 1985 and grew up on the island of Oahu. A neighbor mentioned that the Langfords had moved to the area about a year and a half ago and that they generally received positive reviews. They were described as friendly and religious. Kirk and his pregnant girlfriend led a quiet life. They had a young son and were expecting a second child. Kirk was known as a kind and gentle man who hosted charity Bible studies at his home, and his family regularly attended church. He was considered a trustworthy and moral person. Therefore, when rumors of his involvement in Masumi's kidnapping arose, many found it hard to believe. Kirk himself repeatedly stated that he knew nothing about Masumi's disappearance and had no involvement in the incident. However, he admitted that he was in the area the morning of her disappearance and was driving a white truck at a certain time. He claimed that this was just a coincidence and suggested that witnesses may have been mistaken. There was not enough evidence to arrest him, so the police eventually released him but left their contact information, asking him to call if he remembered anything else. In the days that followed, the police discovered that Kirk owned another white truck, a Ford F-150. They examined Masumi's belongings, such as her toothbrush and a spare pair of glasses, to create a DNA profile for her. Over time, it became increasingly clear that Kirk was directly involved in the kidnapping, making it highly unlikely that Masumi had run away from home. One day, a homeless man came to the police and shared that, while he was walking, he noticed a man digging near a parked white truck. When the homeless man asked what the man was doing, he replied that he was looking for a lost necklace, which seemed suspicious. The homeless man wrote down the truck's license plate number. After an investigation, it was confirmed that the license plate number belonged to Kirk's white Ford F-150. The police had two key pieces of information. A witness saw Kirk's truck near Masumi, and another witness confirmed that Kirk was digging near his car. However, this information alone was not strong enough to obtain a search warrant. Nevertheless, because Kirk had an outstanding traffic ticket, the police were permitted to seize both vehicles for a detailed examination. They also summoned Kirk for questioning, but he refused to answer any questions without a lawyer present. He subsequently took a polygraph test, which he failed. Fortunately for him, polygraph results are not legally admissible in court. The police understood that their best chance of arresting Kirk was to obtain a positive DNA match from his truck and Masumi's belongings. Unfortunately, the processing of the DNA samples took too long, compelling the police to release him. Ultimately, the police found key evidence inside Kirk's work truck. They discovered blood and glasses on the upholstery. A few days later, tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Masumi Watanabe, and the glasses found in the truck matched hers exactly. At this point, Masumi's case shifted from being classified as a missing persons case to a murder investigation. Kirk was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During a subsequent interrogation, he changed his story, claiming that he had actually seen Masumi on the day of the incident. In this new account, he stated that he had accidentally hit her with his car, causing only minor injuries. He claimed he attempted to take her to the hospital, and she reportedly agreed. However, after driving a short distance, she suddenly jumped out of the truck. The car was traveling at over 40 miles per hour, resulting in Masumi hitting her head upon impact. Kirk attributed her strange behavior to their lack of communication, citing her poor English as a contributing factor. He confessed that Masumi had been severely injured and died instantly after jumping from the vehicle, instead of calling the police. He hid her body in the back of his truck that evening. Kirk cleaned out the truck and returned home to have dinner with his wife and children. He then went to a store to make a purchase. Surveillance cameras recorded him at 2 stores buying gloves, a shovel, chlorine-based cleaner, and trash bags. He then transferred the body from the company truck to his own vehicle and drove out into the countryside. There, a homeless man saw him digging, supposedly looking for a necklace, but in reality, he was digging a grave to bury Masumi. When Kirk was discovered by the homeless man, he panicked. Instead of burying Masumi, as he had initially planned, he threw her body into the ocean. He later explained that he lied to the police because he was afraid of losing his job. In an interview, Kirk's live-in girlfriend mentioned that, after dinner on April 12, Kirk went out to work, and when he returned home, she noticed some stains on his clothes. Interestingly, Kirk's girlfriend later recanted her statement. However, the police returned to the burial site but found no evidence. Kirk's claim that he had abandoned his plan to bury the body there turned out to be correct. And, unfortunately, Masumi's body was never found. There was sufficient evidence to convict Kirk, including the testimony of several witnesses, a DNA match linking Masumi to Kirk's belongings, and Kirk's own statements. However, since there was no evidence of intentional conduct, it was challenging to charge him with first-degree murder. As a result, prosecutors decided to charge him with second-degree murder on March 4, 2008, nearly a year after Masumi's disappearance. The trial began. Kirk maintained that the incident was accidental, arguing that Masumi had jumped out of the moving truck on her own and that he was not responsible for her death. Kirk's parents attended the trial and insisted that their son was a good person who could never commit murder. They argued that he was the victim of a plot by the police. The prosecution believed that although Kirk had not planned the kidnapping or murder in advance, they also rejected his claim that the incident was accidental. Experts pointed out that if Kirk had actually hit Masumi with his car, his vehicle would have been damaged. However, upon examination, no such damage was found on the truck. Furthermore, the injuries the girl sustained must have been much more severe than Kirk described, making his entire testimony seem implausible. The police and Masumi's family believed that Kirk had buried her body nearby instead of throwing it into the sea. However, in court, Kirk insisted that he had thrown her body into the ocean. The police contended that if the body had indeed been thrown into the ocean, the tide would eventually wash it ashore, as they had seen in similar cases. Because Masumi's body was never found, the police could not determine the cause of her death or whether she had been abused. Masumi's parents attended the trial. At one point, Kirk told them that he had not tortured Masumi. However, her parents, like the prosecutors, did not believe him. Masumi's father stated that every night he heard Masumi's voice, calling for him to take her home. Masumi's mother expressed that the family would not find peace until they could bring their beloved daughter back to Japan and give her a proper burial. After reviewing the evidence presented in court, the jury deliberated for a day and a half. Ultimately, Kirk Langford was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. This is one of the longest sentences in Hawaiian history. Kirk's appeal was denied. It is hard to describe the depth of pain her family and friends must have felt. Losing a child is one of the hardest experiences for any parent, especially when they cannot even lay their daughter to rest. Masumi was a shy, gentle girl with her whole life ahead of her. She was drawn to the Hawaiian Islands and loved them dearly. Tragically, what was once a true paradise for Masumi became her final resting place. After the verdict, Masumi's mother made an emotional plea. She bowed humbly before the court and begged Kirk to show them where the body was buried. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Norberto Ronquillo. In 2019, Norberto Ronquillo a 22-year-old Mexican student, was kidnapped by unidentified men shortly after leaving college. He had just completed his final semester before graduating. Norberto lived with his uncles in southern Mexico City, just a 15-minute walk from Pedregal University, on the evening of July 4. He left the university at 9 p.m. and texted his girlfriend to say he was coming home. A security camera recorded him leaving the building at around 9:30 p.m., but he disappeared afterward. The case attracted widespread attention in Mexico, and finding those responsible should have been easy. However, the mastermind managed to confuse the investigation, creating a bizarre story that captured the attention of many. Norberto was born in Meoqui, Chihuahua. He was known for being very sociable and charming. He was always ready to help those in need and was well liked by many. Norberto's dream was to move to Mexico City to study marketing at Pedregal University after graduation. Upon arriving in the capital, he lived with his uncles, aunts, and cousins. By the age of 22, his life seemed to be in order. He was dating a girl. On July 4, 2019, Norberto left class at around 9:30 p.m. A surveillance camera recorded him leaving the university parking lot while calmly talking on the phone. Just 15 minutes after he left, his uncles and aunts received a call from his phone. But it was not Norberto on the other end of the line. Another voice informed them that their nephew was being held captive. The young uncle panicked and abruptly hung up. The kidnappers called back, but no one answered. Finally, Norberto's aunt picked up the phone and spoke to the criminals. Their message was clear: to see their nephew Norberto alive. His uncle's family needed to hand over 5 million pesos that night at 10 p.m. The police received a report of a gray Toyota Yaris abandoned in the middle of the road. This was the same model that Norberto owned when the police arrived. They failed to secure the area for potential evidence and did not call in forensic experts to conduct a thorough investigation. This mishandling complicated the case, especially since the car was parked near Norberto's uncle's house, with the keys left on the sidewalk. When Norberto's cousin Osvaldo returned home, he saw the police nearby and informed them that the car belonged to his family. Unfortunately, the police carelessly returned the car to Osvaldo, who was unaware of the troubling events involving his family. At midnight, Osvaldo returned home and received shocking news. He quickly decided to take his father to the police to report the incident. 40 minutes later, the case was officially opened. Meanwhile, Norberto's aunt chose to handle things differently. At 1 a.m., she asked her husband and son to withdraw the complaint, claiming that she had made a deal with the kidnappers. She also negotiated the ransom down to 500 pesos and some jewelry. However, it was too late. The police had already begun their investigation. Meanwhile, the kidnappers made their demands. At 3:30 a.m., Osvaldo was ordered to pay the ransom for Norberto's safe return. They instructed Osvaldo to go to Las Bombas Street, stop at a car wash, collect the money, and throw it behind bars in an empty lot. Osvaldo carefully followed all the instructions. Then the kidnappers informed him that Norberto would be released at the Chalcocan Canal. Osvaldo waited there for hours, but Norberto never arrived. The kidnappers also stopped communicating, and there was no further contact. At 7 in the morning, Osvaldo decided to call the police, who quickly began searching for the missing person. On June 5, at 10 a.m., the Prosecutor General's office officially opened an investigation. Norberto's relatives were summoned to the Ministry of Defense to provide witness statements. Meanwhile, footage from city cameras was reviewed, but no useful information was found. Cameras that may have captured footage of Norberto's abandoned car were thoroughly examined. Unfortunately, they were pointed in the wrong direction. The only camera facing the right direction was broken. The family's desperation quickly spread throughout the country. On June 6th, Norberto did not return home, and news of his disappearance was widely reported. The university then helped raise awareness, leading to media coverage of the kidnapping during his graduation ceremony. Norberto's classmates took the opportunity to rally support for the search. Dressed in caps and gowns, they displayed posters with Norberto's picture, which quickly attracted attention on social media. Norberto's mother traveled to the capital and appeared on several television shows on June 8. A search was conducted in the areas where Norberto's car had been found. Unfortunately, this search did not uncover any new clues. The kidnappers did not contact anyone. As if they had disappeared, questions about Norberto's whereabouts continued to echo throughout the country for a long time. There was only silence, but that silence was finally broken. On June 9 at 6 p.m., the police received an anonymous tip about a body wrapped in a blanket that had been found in the Xochimilco area. The police quickly arrived at the reported location. The area was deserted, with no surveillance cameras, suggesting that the perpetrators had planned the crime carefully. The police sent the body for an autopsy on June 10. Norberto's family came to identify the body. His family confirmed that the body found was Norberto. The autopsy revealed that he had died of exhaustion, and there were signs of torture on his body, including a broken nasal septum. As the investigation continued, the case became increasingly puzzling. Forensic experts reported that the body could have been there for 3 to 5 days, suggesting that Norberto may have died on the day he was kidnapped. Despite attempts to negotiate a ransom with the family, the criminals had no plans to release Norberto, however. These are still just theories. As many uncertainties surrounding the case remain, Norberto's body was cremated, and after the funeral, he was flown back to his hometown. The university suspended all academic activities for 3 days. The investigation into his death continues. Norberto's mother has used social media to call for justice and urge safety measures for all young people to prevent tragedies like her son's from happening again. The first to face consequences was the police, who ignored Norberto's car, a potential piece of evidence. Traces of blood were later found inside the car, but were never tested. When Norberto's cousin Osvaldo got into the car to take it to the garage, he accidentally contaminated potential evidence, however. Osvaldo did not know that Norberto was missing at the time and only learned about it when he got home. Since then, the car has not been mentioned again. The Attorney General's office has analyzed more than 20 hours of video from 6 cameras, including state and private cameras. Located near the scene of the incident, it appears that the criminals used 2 cars to carry out the kidnapping. It was revealed that one of the cars was used to distract attention from the criminals and only intervened if any problems arose. The second car was used specifically for the purpose of kidnapping Norberto. The information gathered led to a 2-part investigation. First, it was assumed that the kidnapping was carried out by a Mexican organized crime group known to the media as the Skinheads. This group targeted students from private universities and high schools within a 10-kilometer radius of Xochimilco. One similarity with Norberto's case is that the gang had previously carried out 5 kidnappings, 3 of which resulted in the victims being killed even after their families had paid ransoms. Furthermore, records show that these victims usually died within the first 48 hours of their capture. However, there are some notable characteristics of skinhead gangs. They shave the victim's head before releasing or killing them. In Norberto's case, his head was not shaved, and there was no evidence that he was being held captive. Negotiations between criminal groups and families are common in these types of crimes. Considering this, the police formed a second hypothesis. The crime could have been committed by someone close to the Norberto. They decided to question Norberto's acquaintances. The Prosecutor General's office found it suspicious that the ransom was arranged so quickly. in just 20 minutes. And it was hard to believe that the criminals would agree to a discount for the family. It was also strange that Norberto's aunt refused to involve the police. Later, the police interviewed Norberto's girlfriend, aunt, uncle, cousins, and close friends. Finally, a breakthrough occurred. The police noticed that Euritzi's ex-boyfriend seemed to be interfering too much in Norberto and Euritzi's private lives. He often expressed dissatisfaction with their relationship, however. Euritzi and Norberto appeared to be a happy couple, regularly sharing photos of themselves together on social media. The day before Norberto went missing, his girlfriend Euritzi posted a tweet that appeared to be directed at her ex-boyfriend, urging him to stop interfering in her life and focus on his own. The Attorney General's office quickly launched an investigation into Euritzi's ex-boyfriend, but the investigation stalled when he could not be found. Finally, a crucial piece of evidence emerged that had previously been overlooked. The red plaid blanket that had been used to wrap Norberto's body had the name Hernandez embroidered on it, indicating that it belonged to a family with that surname. This raised suspicions about Norberto's maternal family. The Attorney General's office investigated 47 people with the surname Hernandez. Unfortunately, these investigations were fruitless and caused delays. Meanwhile, the most promising lead in the case came from surveillance cameras. When the police reviewed footage from a camera on Las Bombas Street, they saw a white van and a red sedan drive by at 3 a.m., shortly after Osvaldo delivered the ransom, with 3 people getting out of the vehicles. After receiving new information, the police were able to clarify some important details. They quickly identified the red sedan and its owner. This discovery led to several arrests. The first arrest was of Daniel, the owner of the red sedan. In his statement, Daniel explained that he used the car to transport passengers for a private company. He said that the person driving the car that night was actually his friend, Oscar. The police then went to Miguel Hidalgo to find Oscar. When Oscar was arrested, the police found packages containing illegal synthetic substances. They also learned that he had previously been involved in a criminal case. Based on information provided by Daniel and Oscar, the police arrested Jose Fernando, who was also found to have illegal substances, on July 7, more than a month after Norberto's death. The preliminary results of the investigation were released to the public, creating considerable interest. The police stated that one of the suspects was Daniel's cousin, but Daniel's father insisted that he had never heard of Norberto. This raised questions about how Daniel could have known Norberto and why he would plan to kill him. New evidence quickly emerged in the case to expedite the investigation. Oscar appeared in court a few days later and surprisingly confessed to being involved in the crime. They uncovered key details and identified a woman named Euritzi Martinez, Norberto's ex-lover, as the mastermind behind the crime. Euritzi met Norberto about 3 years ago, and they dated for a short time. Romantic photos and messages to her were found on Norberto's Facebook page, and his aunt confirmed their relationship. However, the motive behind Euritzi's involvement in the crime remains unclear. Euritzi asked for Norberto to be kidnapped because he owed her 700 pesos. They planned to demand 5 million pesos from his family after she received the money. The rest would be divided among the kidnappers. Euritzi claimed that Norberto's uncle and aunt owned shops in the Central Market, which would make it easier for them to collect the ransom. However, things quickly spiraled out of control, and Norberto was killed on the night of his kidnapping. The police promptly opened a case against Norberto's ex-girlfriend, Euritzi. Until July 14, she was still active on social media. After the arrest warrant for Euritzi was issued, she disappeared. She deleted her social media accounts and turned off her cell phone. A few days later, the investigation revealed that there was no debt between Norberto and Euritzi. It became clear that she only wanted to profit from Norberto's family. On July 28, 2019, Daniel and Oscar were arrested and taken into custody at a pre-trial detention facility. Initially, it seemed that the case was almost solved, with the only remaining task being to find Eurytsi. However, during the investigation, the police discovered that Elvia, the owner of the house where Norberto had been held, was involved in the kidnapping. On September 21, Elvia was arrested for unlawful deprivation of liberty. Following her arrest, new details of the investigation emerged. It was revealed that Elvia was a witch and that the kidnappers had approached her to perform a ritual to assist in the kidnapping. Elvia had voluntarily joined the criminal group, motivated by the prospect of receiving a portion of the ransom. The final arrest in the case occurred on October 22. When the police apprehended Jose Fernando, they sought him for drug trafficking. 3 days later, after being taken to prison, Jose was informed that he would also face charges for kidnapping Norberto. This indicated that the case was close to being resolved. However, the family could not achieve full justice because the main instigator, Eurytsi Martinez, was still on the run. The Mexico City judiciary found Jose, Daniel, Elvia, and Oscar guilty of kidnapping and murdering Norberto Ronquillo. They were each sentenced to 140 years in prison and ordered to pay more than 1 million pesos in damages. 4 years after the case, Eurytsi is still missing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samantha and Tessara Crespi. David Crespi comes from a family known for its success and respect. He is from Sacramento, California, and both he and his brother, along with their father, graduated from California State University. David earned an accounting degree with honors in 1983. His older brother, John, is the pride of the family, having become a professor of economics at Kansas State University. With his excellent academic performance, David easily found a job at a local bank, where he quickly rose to the position of CFO. However, the bank eventually closed. He then worked as a manager at a mortgage company in Sacramento. David has 2 children from his first marriage. However, his life took a difficult turn when his first wife died of a brain tumor. David devoted himself to providing for his children during this trying time. Fortunately, he soon met Kim, a woman he had known since college. Their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship, and they began living together in 1994. Kim married David and adopted his children. In 1997, they welcomed a son, and 4 years later, they had twins, Tessara and Samantha. In total, David has 5 children with 2 women. In 2001, David moved to a new and promising bank, prompting his family to relocate to Matthews, a small town in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. By 2006, David Crespi was a vice president at a bank and lived with his family in a comfortable 3-story house in a prosperous area of Matthews. They had lived in this quiet neighborhood for nearly 5 years, which was considered an ideal place to raise children. The family shared a strong, loving bond and maintained a warm relationship with one another. David was regarded as a caring and active family man. They were actively involved in their local church, where David served on the finance committee. To many, it seemed that David had achieved his dream. What appeared to be a happy life actually concealed deeper problems. From a young age, David struggled with mental health issues. On the surface, he seemed to be a kind, devoted, successful, hard-working, an intelligent husband and father. However, he often suffered from severe bouts of depression that would come and go without warning. His condition worsened after the death of his first wife, but it only began to improve when Kim entered his life. She did her best to support him, and they both believed that this would help him overcome his challenges. Unfortunately, it was not enough. David's mental health issues began when he was 20 years old. At that time, He faced typical challenges in love and difficulties in planning for the future, which left him in a state of sadness. Adult life turned out to be more difficult than he had anticipated. Despite this, David still managed to excel in everything he did and worked tirelessly, not realizing that his success came at a high cost. As a young man, David did not seek help and preferred to solve problems on his own. As an adult, his depression often stemmed from the increased demands of his job and the responsibilities he assumed. His family was aware of his difficulties, and his colleagues noticed when he occasionally fell into a state of depression. However, David usually recovered quite quickly. There were no serious consequences for his work life. People understood his situation. He could take a day off, but his colleagues covered for him and provided sick leave when necessary. Their support seemed justified because, while his depression was in remission, David excelled in his field. The situation became increasingly serious. David was a devout Catholic, as was his entire family, according to his faith. End life was considered a sin. Despite this belief, David frequently contemplated end life during his time as vice president and even attempted it several times without success. During this period, David chose to spend time outdoors, searching for a suitable place to end his life instead of working. His wife tried to intervene and save him during these moments. After each attempt, David promised his family that he would not try to commit end life again. David struggled with depression that he could not control. Simply promising himself not to harm himself did not help him dispel his dark thoughts. His frustration grew. Instead of feeling like harming himself, he began to have thoughts about harming others. One time, when David and Kim were stopped at a traffic light, he seriously considered driving into a crowd. His wife thought he was joking. Unaware of how sincere his feelings were at this time, David tried several prescription medications, but they were ineffective. His attempts to deal with his mental health issues on his own made him paranoid and withdrawn. He became increasingly anxious about losing his job and going bankrupt. Often imagining the worst-case scenarios, Kim encouraged him to see a psychiatrist, who prescribed him antidepressants. David agreed and committed to the treatment regimen the doctor gave him. David had been on one medication for years, but it caused him to gain weight, which frustrated him. Annoyed by this side effect, he decided to stop taking the medication and try something else. He returned to the psychiatrist, hoping to adjust his treatment regimen for better results. By 2006, he was very familiar with his mental health problems, which had become more frequent and intense during these times. He was haunted by thoughts of harming others. David often thought about ending his life voluntarily, but because of his promise not to harm himself, he considered harming others instead. Although he saw his doctor regularly, he never revealed these feelings. Hoping that a prescription medication would help him manage his difficulties, he feared losing everything he had built. He understood that if his doctor knew about his obsessive thoughts, it could lead to serious consequences, such as hospitalization, loss of his job, or separation from his wife and children. He tried not to think about harming others and fought against these thoughts. David's last appointment with a psychiatrist was on January 19, 2006. Shortly before the tragic events occurred, the psychiatrist prescribed new medication, believing that David was struggling with sleep problems and anxiety. He had also recently changed his previous medication, which could cause weight gain. The psychiatrist did not notice anything unusual. David was very good at hiding his emotions and preferred to rely on himself. On the morning of January 20, 2006, David's family was at home. Kim, David, and their 5-year-old twins, Samantha and Tessera, whom David adored, were all together. David was on sick leave due to his battle with depression. At that time, everything seemed normal, and there was no sign that anything was wrong. At 11:30 a.m., David received a call from his mother. It was a routine check-in. She was aware of his mental health issues and called at the same time every day to see how he was doing, and if he needed any support. They talked for about 15 minutes. during which David reassured her that everything was fine. His 3 older children were at school at the time at 12:15 p.m., while Samantha and Tessara were having lunch. Kim was looking after them. She felt confident that nothing would happen to the children because David loved them very much. She believed that they would be safe with him. Kim had gone out to get a haircut after lunch. David worked on the computer, but then took a break to spend time with his daughters. He suggested they play hide and seek, and they scattered to find hiding places around the house. David went into the kitchen and laid out some knives on the table. He then began to search for the twins. He saw Samantha first. She was smiling and unaware of the dark thoughts in his mind, deciding to end the game. He quietly took her to the kitchen. Suddenly, he picked her up and placed her on the kitchen table. He took a knife and began to attack Samantha. The little girl screamed and struggled, and then she stopped breathing, hearing strange noises. Tessara came out of hiding and saw her father attacking Samantha, even though she was only 5 years old. She sensed that something terrible was happening, fearing for her own safety. She hid on the 2nd floor of the house. Unfortunately, Tessara was easily discovered in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The little girl begged David not to hurt her, but David ignored her cries. He pinned her to the floor and began to attack her with a knife. Tessara cried, screamed, and fought fiercely against her father, but all in vain. Once a loving father, he had now left his 2 young daughters lifeless. David then considered end life, but ultimately decided against it. Instead of running away, he showered, changed clothes, and called 911. During the call, he calmly confessed that he had killed his 2 daughters and attempted CPR. Although he believed it was useless, as they were already dead, he answered the police's questions clearly, providing his details, his phone number, and his wife's location. He appeared calm rather than distressed and requested emergency assistance, expressing his desire to end his life. After the call ended, the police quickly arrived at David's home. David's home is located on Creek Road in an affluent area, where his family lives in a villa. It was surprising that such a tragic event could happen in a place known for its prosperity. When the police arrived, David was found sitting outside the house, waiting for them and for his wife Kim, who was still at the beauty salon. He surrendered and accompanied the police back to the house. Kim later returned home and learned of the situation. Initially, Kim feared that her husband had committed end life, but when she learned the truth, she was shocked. The police placed David under 24-hour surveillance and provided him with specialized clothing designed to prevent self-harm, removing any dangerous objects from his immediate vicinity. The case attracted considerable public attention, as a prominent and wealthy man faced the possibility of the death penalty, which is legal in North Carolina. It is reported that David may reach a plea deal with the prosecution if he admits to 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecutor's office will agree not to pursue the death penalty. As a result, David could face life in prison without parole. Many feel that this sentence is too lenient for the deaths of Samantha and Tessara, 2 innocent girls. During questioning, David mentioned that he had been dealing with depression and suggested that his actions were influenced by a new medication prescribed by his doctor. David has spoken openly about his illness, seemingly trying to shift the prosecutor's focus to his condition, which he believes caused the tragic events. He stated that he had struggled with depression for years and had finally reached a point where he could no longer bear it. Over the past few months, his condition had worsened significantly. He revealed that he had intended to harm strangers with his car, but also admitted that he had darker thoughts about his wife and 5 children while they slept. Amid his financial struggles, he was overwhelmed by the fear of losing his job as a bank vice president. He felt disillusioned by his inability to provide for his wife and children, which left him feeling unstable. On that day, he heard voices in his head telling him that there was no future, that everything was ruined, and that he had to kill his daughters. David believed that the twins were also suffering from depression, which was why they were not attending kindergarten. He eventually came to the disturbing conclusion that killing Samantha and Tessara might ease his own pain and prevent his mental health from deteriorating further. Kim shocked many by forgiving and supporting David. Despite his violent actions, she felt the death penalty was too harsh and believed it would not bring her children back to life, despite her heartache over the tragedy. Kim has repeatedly told the media that executing David would only cause further harm to the family. She expressed relief that her husband did not commit end life before the police arrived. Kim believes that his actions stemmed from mental health issues that he could not control, including severe depression and psychosis. She remains hopeful that he will eventually recover and return to the loving and calm person he once was. The Supreme Court is reviewing the death penalty. Some believe that David deserves the death penalty for killing his 2 children. However, the prosecutor was reluctant to pursue this option because it would be difficult to convince all 12 jurors. As a result, the inquest continues to investigate more disturbing evidence beyond David's confession. David's attorneys have prepared a strong argument against the death penalty, emphasizing his long history of severe mental illness, which has spanned more than 2 decades prior to this tragic event. David had no criminal record. He was a devoted family man and a respectable citizen. There was no history of aggressive behavior in his past, and he had never harmed his wife or children. As Kim and other family members confirmed, the defense argued that on January 20, David's mental illness led to the tragic deaths of his 2 children. The attorneys, along with all of David's relatives, believed that he was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the incident. Kim stated that he had been working hard for years to control his mental health issues and had been successful. They had consulted with professionals, and he had been prescribed medication. However, Kim felt that the treatment he received was not effective enough over the years. The family continued to seek help and adhered to the treatment plan, ensuring that he took his medication as prescribed. A psychological evaluation revealed that David had more serious mental health problems than initially thought, rather than just depression and anxiety. He was diagnosed with psychosis. It became clear that the medications prescribed were not appropriate for his condition. Several years before the incident, David had been diagnosed with genital cancer and had been successfully treated on the day of the tragedy. He was scheduled for a follow-up appointment. His attorneys presented medical documents showing that he had been prescribed several medications, one for depression, another for anxiety, and a third to help him sleep. While on the antidepressants, David gained more than 20 kg and had difficulty breathing, which forced him to stop taking the medication. His doctor then prescribed another medication in January, but it did not resolve his sleep problems. He finally returned to the doctor just 1 day before the murder. Medical records show that David's treating physician removed his sedative and sleeping pills and prescribed a different sleeping pill instead. After this change, David began to notice alterations in his mental state, impairing his ability to think clearly. The day before the twins were murdered, he became delirious and acted erratically, experiencing extreme mood swings. This exacerbated his anxiety about not being able to provide for his family. However, management at the bank where he worked described David as having an excellent work record, with no indication that he was in danger of losing his job. Despite this reassurance, David's mental state left him vulnerable to irrational fears. He worried that he might not receive a bonus from the bank, recalling that he had earned $45 the year before, but doubting that he would receive the same amount again. However, he later discovered that the bank had approved a large bonus during this difficult time. David was not in a clear state of mind and could not think rationally while awaiting the hearing in the case of Samantha and Tessara's murder. Kim visited her husband frequently. She repeatedly expressed her deep faith and love for him, believing that one day they would overcome the challenges caused by his illness and avoid such terrible tragedies. Kim only knew David as a kind and loving person. She believed that inadequate treatment led to the deaths of their children and the pain the family endured afterward. The scene of the crime was tragic. It is hard to imagine the pain Kim felt when she returned from the beauty salon to find the police and paramedics carrying her daughter's bodies. In fact, David's troubled thoughts began long before these tragic events. At the time, David was being treated with prescription medications. The initial treatment regimen helped control his negative thoughts to some extent, but things changed when adjustments were made. Experts later concluded that the new drugs had caused acute psychosis, according to David's own confession. When Samantha and Tessara were only 1 year old, he had thoughts of harming them. One day, while walking with the girls in the backyard, he hid a weapon in his pocket. Fortunately, he regained his composure and realized that he needed to stop. He convinced himself that he could overcome his challenges and that his family's financial situation would improve. David later returned to the doctor, but avoided discussing his thoughts of harming his children. Instead, he vaguely mentioned having bad thoughts about harming others and expressed his fear of losing his children and family by withholding information. He likely misled his doctors. As a result, he was prescribed medications that he had taken previously, which led to weight gain. In his confession, David admitted that, for many years, he had often felt like harming a family member, but he had been able to control these impulses until now. He believed that he had everything under control and could never actually act on the harmful thoughts. David recounted that after his wife got a haircut one morning, he was working on his computer when the obsessive thought returned. It urged him to kill his children. He thought that if he did so, all his worries would disappear because he would have no one to care for. David realized that his mental problems were related to his actions. During his initial interrogations, David responded coldly. When asked why he killed both girls instead of just one, he explained that because they were twins, they needed to die together. However, the situation changed when David received comprehensive treatment. It was only then that he understood the severity of his crime. He admitted that he had never shared his thoughts about killing his children. His wife, Kim, did not fully understand the gravity of her husband's condition. David's doctor was not held responsible after the tragedy. Citing David's failure to provide accurate information, the doctor was unaware of many of David's hidden struggles, which prevented him from fully assessing the situation. Furthermore, all medications have side effects that can vary from person to person, and doctors cannot predict such severe reactions. David received support and treatment while in prison, which had a positive impact on him. During his preliminary hearing, he began to understand the extent of his responsibility for his actions and fully admitted his guilt. Psychiatrists confirmed that he was fit to stand trial. David's family was shocked by what had happened. His father had seen him just a week before the tragic event. He appeared healthy and showed no signs of impending disaster. On July 30, 2006, the hearings took place. Ultimately, David Crespi reached a plea deal and pleaded guilty, while the prosecutor's office chose not to pursue the death penalty. This decision caused considerable controversy, dividing public opinion. With one group calling for the death penalty, the trial was brief, and the jury sentenced David Crespi to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The trial was short but filled with deep emotion. David's family cried, and he struggled to hold back tears as he came to terms with the pain his actions had caused. He felt he would be haunted by guilt for the rest of his life. Even the police officers who had arrived at the scene that day were in tears. A young officer went upstairs and discovered Tessara's body. He checked for a pulse, hoping she was still alive. The police carried the injured child down the stairs, praying that she would survive. However, when the doctors examined the body, it was clear that she had died from her injuries. What the police felt as a pulse may have been his own heartbeat. This story raises many questions. Was David truly unaware of what was happening at the time? Were his actions influenced by a psychotic episode? He appeared normal when he talked to his mother and wife and went to work. However, his actions were completely different when his wife Kim left the house. Everything seemed normal. But he caused a massacre right afterward. He considered end life, but decided against it and tried to calm down. So why didn't he try to control himself in the moment when he killed the child? Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shannon Medill. Shannon Medill was born in 1989 in Alberta, Canada. She spent years honing her acting skills. Her journey was challenging, but she was ready to start a new chapter in her life. On November 26, 2014, Shannon auditioned and was selected. But before she could celebrate her achievement, she disappeared without a trace. After a day passed without Shannon returning home, her family's worries grew as no one could reach her. Shannon's family was confused. Not knowing what could have happened, they called her cell phone, sent messages on all social media platforms, and left emails. But Shannon did not respond. Her behavior was unusual and completely out of character. Shannon's family contacted the police, but they stressed that Shannon was an adult who had the right to come and go without informing anyone. However, Shannon's family insisted that this behavior was out of character for her and that a search had to be launched. Fearing that something terrible might have happened, Shannon was the youngest of 4 children. From a young age, she loved being the center of attention and was very creative. She loved to sing and began performing in small shows in kindergarten, showcasing her acting talent during her school years. Ultimately, did not complete her studies. Choosing instead to focus on her acting skills, Shannon spent her days attending auditions and interviews, but she was constantly rejected. However, during this time, she found an opportunity in comedy and began performing stand-up, which helped her become famous in 2010. When Shannon turned 21, she attended a party with friends to relax there. She met Joshua Burgess. He was quite different from Shannon, but they quickly connected, and these differences eventually helped balance each other out. The couple enjoyed spending time together, watching TV and playing video games. They shared many interests, which strengthened their relationship. After 4 years of dating, the couple decided to get married. In May 2014, Shannon began planning her wedding. With Joshua's active support, their wedding, attended by only their closest family members, was a joyous event. However, the couple did not seem completely happy. Over the next month, Shannon focused on her acting career, attending more auditions, some of which took place in Edmonton, a city 3 hours north of Calgary, where she lived with her husband. This meant she spent a lot of time traveling between the two places. Shannon has appeared in numerous television shows, voiced audiobooks, and even acted in plays. She has often expressed her belief that great success awaits her in Edmonton. On November 26, 2014, 25-year-old Shannon and her brother Brett had planned to meet at the Calgary Theatre. Prior to their meeting, Shannon had auditioned for a show and she was accepted. Marking a major milestone in her journey to pursue her dreams, Brett was waiting for Shannon at the theater, and he understood how important the event was to her. As the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew. He couldn't reach her. Shannon ignored his messages. Eventually, he had no choice but to leave. He tried calling her the next morning, but she still didn't answer. Brett contacted their parents, but they were also confused about the situation. His mother suggested that Shannon's work schedule might have changed. She mentioned that sometimes, when Shannon worked the night shift, she would sleep during the day. However, this explanation didn't seem plausible. Shannon usually paid attention to her phone calls because it was important for her to stay in touch and not miss anything significant. To reassure herself, their mother thought that when Shannon woke up in the evening, she would realize she had missed the calls and would eventually call back. A voicemail message was left for Shannon, and her family assured her that they were not angry with her. They just wanted her to let them know she was safe. Unfortunately, she did not respond, worried that something was wrong. Her relatives, including her husband Joshua, went to the police for help. They reported her missing and speculated that she might have been in an accident while traveling to or from Edmonton. Initially, the police were slow to act on their request, but after some persuasion, they began to get involved. Eventually, The police launched a search operation, hospitals were checked, but no accidents were reported that day. The following days were a blur. Family members anxiously awaited any news during this time. Shannon did not shop, did not use any credit cards, and there were no activity records on her car. As if she had disappeared, she also stopped using her social media accounts, where she often shared updates about her acting career. Unexpectedly, a few days later, Joshua reported to the police that he had found Shannon's cell phone in her pants pocket at home. He also discovered her car, but the police did not find anything suspicious. Nearly 2 weeks passed without any news until the police found some unusual photos. 2 photos of a girl with her hair covering her face were found attached to a tree in a Calgary park, although the identity could not be confirmed. The girl bore a strong resemblance to Shannon, especially due to her bright red hair. It appeared that a potential kidnapper was taunting the police. Search efforts were organized in Big Sugar Creek, one of Canada's largest parks. Several teams were formed, including volunteers and Shannon's family members. For 2 days, police scoured a large area, assisted by specially trained dogs and a rescue helicopter that surveyed the park from the air. Unfortunately, these efforts were unsuccessful. It was later discovered that the images that prompted the search were part of an art project created by local university students. Realizing that their photos had been mistakenly taken as evidence in connection with the case, the students contacted the police to clarify the situation. During this time, her family anxiously awaited news, but there were no clues regarding Shannon's whereabouts. It was unclear whether she would ever be found alive. The idea of a kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no ransom was demanded, nor had the family been contacted. Joshua revealed a previously unknown fact to the police. He explained that his wife had been struggling with her acting career for years. One evening, she called him and confessed that she had considered jumping off a bridge during a particularly difficult time. She had just suffered another disappointment after auditioning for a role in a television series she had hoped to land. Fortunately, she was able to overcome the emotional pain, but she later suffered a nervous breakdown. The police were concerned that such a traumatic experience might have led her to consider end life. Police and divers searched rivers in the area, hoping to find any sign of her. Unfortunately, despite exhaustive searches along the riverbank for miles, they found no clues, and the investigation hit a dead end. By May 2015, nearly 6 months after Shannon disappeared, the police still had no clue as to her whereabouts. During this time, an experienced police officer named Christine took over the investigation. Having worked in the homicide division for many years, she was known for her determination and attention to detail. Her previous efforts had led to the arrest of many dangerous criminals, and she was committed to solving this case. Christine decided to investigate those close to Shannon. She wanted to learn more about her husband, Joshua. From the beginning, he seemed like a kind and positive person. He cooperated fully with the police, allowing them to search his home twice and readily answering their questions. He also supported Shannon's family when they went to the police station to report her disappearance. Even after she went missing, the family kept in touch with Joshua, comforting each other and holding out hope. When asked about the possibility that Joshua was involved in Shannon's disappearance, all of her relatives responded that he could never hurt his wife. However, during discussions with Shannon's family about her husband, Joshua, the police made a surprising discovery. The couple had been married for over 7 months at the time of the tragic events, but it was only now, 6 months after Shannon's disappearance, that it was revealed that they had an open marriage. This meant that they were in an unconventional relationship where both Joshua and Shannon could have other partners. Joshua claimed that he proposed this arrangement and that Shannon agreed. Although she did not seem particularly interested in it, Shannon's family was also aware of the arrangement. This arrangement allowed Joshua and Shannon to explore their private lives more freely, especially when Joshua was dating other women. According to Joshua, they had no disputes about their open marriage. Surprisingly, Shannon knew about all of her husband's affairs and had even met some of his girlfriends. Officer Christine discovered that Joshua had had about 7 affairs during their marriage. It was important to interview all of his girlfriends. The police were then able to locate and question them without any difficulty, according to the investigation. Joshua's last girlfriend shared some intriguing details. She continued to see him even after Shannon went missing. This girlfriend revealed information that the police had never heard before. They discovered that just before Shannon went missing, there had been a serious conflict between her and Joshua concerning the openness of their relationship. When Shannon decided to end their open marriage, Joshua's girlfriend stated that to avoid further conflict, he agreed with Shannon's decision. However, a week later, Shannon discovered that Joshua was still in contact with his girlfriend. Despite his promise to end the relationship, she found out because he had locked his phone, which was unusual, as they had previously been free to check each other's devices. When Joshua gave her the password, Shannon discovered that instead of breaking up with his mistress, he had decided to marry her, making Shannon the second person in his life. Joshua claims he is planning to file for divorce soon. Shannon felt deeply betrayed after throwing away Joshua's phone. She carefully considered her situation and made some important decisions, including moving from Calgary to Edmonton. She was in the process of implementing this plan at the time of her disappearance. During this period, she continued to live with Joshua, but they arranged their schedules to avoid seeing each other. Their relationship was extremely strained. Shannon often worked night shifts, while Joshua had a completely different schedule, causing them to barely see one another, according to the investigation. Shannon's life ended on November 27, 2014. After that day, all her banking transactions stopped. She ceased using the internet, and her phone went silent at noon. However, a signal from her phone was detected in an alley in the city the next morning. Joshua later claimed that he had found the phone at home. Interestingly, a few days later, Joshua also discovered Shannon's car, but could not explain how he found it. All of this seemed very suspicious to Officer Christine. Christine decided to speak to Joshua again. Meanwhile, an application to confiscate Joshua's phone had been filed, as he was increasingly considered a prime suspect in Shannon's case. In addition, the police decided to confiscate the car. On June 2, 2015, 7 months after Shannon's disappearance, Police Christine, along with other police, went to Joshua's house. They brought a search warrant to confiscate his cell phone and car. The officers knocked on the door and asked to enter the house. But initially, Joshua did not answer. After a while, he responded to the police and announced that he would be coming out soon. It appeared that Joshua was moving around inside, possibly trying to buy time to hide something. He answered the second police call, but explained the delay by saying that he was looking for his pants. Joshua spoke from behind a closed door and was asked to come out. Regardless of his appearance, the police sensed that something important was happening inside. They were prepared for any eventuality, including the use of weapons. Suddenly, he burst into tears and confessed to killing Shannon. After some persuasion, he finally opened the door. The police entered and saw Joshua bleeding. On the floor next to him was a military knife, which he had used to commit end life. He was rushed to the hospital. Joshua had lost a significant amount of blood, but he was not in critical condition and did not require surgery. The doctors were able to stitch up his wound. A psychiatric evaluation was needed to determine whether he was a danger to himself or others. When Joshua was taken into the interrogation room, he only said that he would confess his love to Shannon if he could see her alive, and he did not say anything else. Meanwhile, the police searched Joshua's home with the help of sniffer dogs. Later, they discovered a body buried in the yard, and during the excavation, they found enough evidence to secure a conviction. However, they still wanted to obtain a confession and hear Joshua's account of the events. On the second day after his arrest, Joshua provided a detailed account of the events on the day Shannon went missing. He returned home and found her sitting on the couch. She appeared very upset and immediately accused him of cheating, calling him a traitor for the affair. In a fit of rage, she lost control and said many harsh words to him, unable to bear her accusations. Joshua tried to cover her mouth with his hand. In response, Shannon bit him and continued to insult him, expressing her disgust at his attempts to touch her. In a fit of rage, Joshua grabbed Shannon by the neck and began to strangle her until she stopped breathing. When he realized she was dead, he became frightened and was unable to call an ambulance because she was dead. When Joshua recounted this, he became emotional, cried, and clearly felt remorse for his actions. Finally, the confession brought him relief after 8 long months of carrying this secret. During this time, Shannon's body lay in their home, despite being checked twice by the police. They ignored the containers on the back porch, which were hidden under trash bags to avoid detection. Joshua Burgess was charged with second-degree murder. Shannon's family eventually learned the truth about what had happened, shocking everyone to discover that the killer had been near them the entire time. Even helping to find Shannon, Joshua's trial attracted considerable public and media attention. Despite his remorse, Joshua did not want to make his confession public and refused to attend the trial. Shannon's family believed that he was a coward who did not dare to face Shannon's loved ones. The prosecutor's office and the family contended that it was a premeditated murder and that he was still trying to hide the evidence. He acted as if nothing had happened. Hoping to escape prosecution and punishment at the last minute, the jury found Joshua Burgess guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. With the possibility of parole after 10 years, the family of the Shannon was unhappy with this sentence. They believed that it was Joshua's lifestyle that led to the end of Shannon's life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Charlotte Mulhall. In March 2005, a gruesome murder occurred in Ireland when a fisherman made a disturbing discovery in a canal. He initially thought he had found a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was part of a human leg wearing a sock. He immediately contacted the police. The subsequent investigation revealed many details about this infamous case. The Mulhall family lived in South Dublin, Ireland, consisting of parents John and Kathleen and their 6 children, 3 daughters and 3 sons. The family faced challenges related to alcohol and substance abuse. Both parents drank regularly, and their arguments often became loud and violent, all in front of the children, despite their troubled marriage. John and Kathleen remained together for 27 years. However, by the early 2000s, when their children were grown, they decided to divorce due to financial issues, but continued to live together. At first, it seemed that family life was getting better. However, in 2002, Kathleen introduced her new boyfriend, Farah Swala Noor, who was 14 years her junior. Kathleen's ex-husband, John, felt uncomfortable having a stranger in his home, especially since Farah was now sharing a bed with Kathleen. In response, John decided to leave and move in with his girlfriend. Unfortunately, his new partner soon kicked him out of the house, and he spent a year wandering around Dublin before returning home. Luckily for John, by that time, Kathleen and Farah had moved into a rented flat in another area of Dublin. Farah arrived in Ireland in December 1996 under the false name Sheila Salim. He claimed to be from Somalia and said that his entire family had died in the Civil War. In fact, he was from Kenya and his family still lived there. Farah had a record of minor crimes, and when his deception was discovered, he faced deportation. He successfully appealed the decision. In March 1999, he married a Dublin resident, and they had a child together, which enabled him to obtain Irish citizenship after naturalization. Farah left his wife and began living a chaotic life, relying on odd jobs and petty theft to make ends meet. Farah had a violent past, including an incident in which he abused a mentally disabled Chinese woman, although she bore him a son. Farah escaped punishment for his actions. Reports suggest he harbored a deep hatred for women. In 2002, Farah met Kathleen, and they began a tumultuous relationship. Both were unemployed and relied on odd jobs to make ends meet. Their shared love of alcohol initially bonded them, but over time, their difficult personalities led to frequent arguments, which Kathleen's children often witnessed. Kathleen's eldest daughter, Linda, was born in 1975. She dropped out of school at a young age, by the age of 24. She had 4 children and often forgot the names of her boyfriends due to a series of short-lived relationships. Linda also served a short prison sentence for theft and struggled with alcohol and drug addiction. Linda's younger sister, Charlotte, had her own legal troubles, with around 7 convictions for theft, property damage, escort services, and other misdemeanors. Like Linda, Charlotte also struggled with serious addiction issues. The other siblings also had their own legal problems, and none were considered positive role models. On Sunday, March 20, 2005, Linda invited Charlotte to her apartment. While they were talking in the kitchen, Charlotte suggested that they start celebrating her birthday, which was the next day. At first, Linda refused because she had been abstaining from alcohol for 3 weeks to regain custody of her children, who were in a shelter. However, the temptation to drink became too strong, and half an hour later, they opened a bottle of hard liquor to start the birthday celebration. A few hours later, the sisters decided to visit their mother and her partner, Farah. When they called their mother, they found out that Kathleen and Farah were at a bar in central Dublin. Without hesitation, the sisters joined them. It turned out that Kathleen and Farah had been celebrating St. Patrick's Day for 4 consecutive days. After meeting Linda and Charlotte at the bar, the family did not stay long and decided to continue celebrating at a nearby park. However, Farah got into an argument with some locals, forcing the family to stay out of trouble and decide to go home. The 4 of them returned to Kathleen and Farah's rented apartment. They prepared food and set the table to celebrate Charlotte's upcoming birthday. When everything was ready, Farah fell asleep. To lift Farah's spirits, Kathleen slipped a pill into his drink. Although the ecstasy worked, things did not go as they had expected. A moment later, Linda, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly felt Farah caress and squeeze her legs. Then he put his arm around her waist and whispered inappropriate words into her ear. At first, Linda did not want to cause a scandal, so she reminded Farah to behave. After witnessing Farah's inappropriate actions, Linda openly asked him to take his hands off her. Realizing that the situation was escalating, Kathleen and Charlotte began to insult Farah and asked him to behave properly. The argument quickly turned into a fight. Then, Farah grabbed Kathleen, causing her to scream for help to her daughters. In response, Charlotte pulled a knife from her pocket and attacked Farah. Seeing her sister Charlotte in danger, Linda rushed to the pantry and grabbed a large iron hammer. Under the influence of alcohol, Linda lost control of her actions. Soon, the floors, walls, and rooms were in chaos. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, Kathleen, sat in a chair, holding a glass and watching her 2 daughters attack Farah. Eventually, she grew tired of the commotion and turned her attention to the television, where an entertainment program was playing. After the altercation, the sisters began to understand what had happened, and panic set in. Kathleen stepped in to help and gave Linda and Charlotte a plan for how to dispose of Farah's body. Kathleen said that no one would charge them with murder if Farah's body was not found. So Linda and Charlotte spent the next 5 hours in the bathroom processing the body. During this time, Kathleen took a nap. When Kathleen woke up, she found 7 black plastic bags in the hallway. She called her ex-husband John to tell him about the nightmare that had unfolded in their rented apartment. John was skeptical and did not believe her at first. However, when he arrived and saw the scene from the front door, he realized it was no joke. He declared that he would not participate and went home. After a short break, Kathleen and her 2 daughters began a thorough cleaning of the apartment. They used brooms and several gallons of bleach to meticulously wipe down every surface. At noon on March 21, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte left the rented apartment, each carrying a sports bag containing black trash bags. They walked to the nearest river channel and, unnoticed, threw 6 black bags into the water. The women then went to a restaurant afterward. They took a bus for about an hour to the city center. Once there, they stopped at a large store, browsed several areas, withdrew money from an ATM, and went to a park. In the park, they dug a shallow hole with a knife and buried the last bag. They eventually threw the knife and hammer into a nearby pond before returning home over the next few days. Kathleen and her daughters focused on cleaning the rental apartment. Kathleen bought a large amount of cleaning supplies. She later admitted that there was a terrible, nauseating smell in the room that no cleaning product could remove. Kathleen and Charlotte coped with the smell by drinking and using drugs to forget it. However, Linda was very distressed, crying constantly and unable to calm down. 10 days later, one of the bags that Kathleen and her daughters had thrown into the Dublin Canal floated to the surface. A local fisherman discovered it and quickly called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they drained the canal, and divers searched the area, eventually finding 6 black bags containing the man's body. A forensic expert determined that the man had suffered 28 injuries due to the brutal nature of the case. The police initially speculated that he may have died during a witchcraft ritual, but later ruled this theory out after consulting with experts. The police knew they needed to solve the case by identifying the victim. However, the DNA database did not have any matches for the body. Therefore, officers decided to take a different approach. They shared descriptions and photos of the items found in the victim's bag through social media. Among these items was a torn T-shirt with the logo of an Irish football club. This shirt helped identify the victim as Farah Swaleh Noor. As one of his old friends from Somalia recognized it, this friend also mentioned that Farah had been missing for several weeks and had stopped answering calls. Police discovered that Farah had been living with a girlfriend named Kathleen Mulhall for the past few years. This information prompted further investigation. Samolit received a cash reward for helping to locate Kathleen, while 2 others, Linda and Charlotte, were brought in for questioning. All 3 denied any involvement, and the police had no evidence to charge the women. So they were released the same day. In July 2005, one of Kathleen's sons, who was serving time in prison for a traffic violation, informed a guard that his mother and sisters had killed Farah. He claimed that during a prison visit, Kathleen had confessed to the crime to him. Following this revelation, the police searched Kathleen's apartment and discovered traces of Farah's blood. In August 2005, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte were again questioned at the police station. They maintained their innocence, and the interrogation lasted 12 hours. Kathleen and her 2 daughters, Linda and Charlotte, were then released during this time. Linda, who was extremely remorseful, called the police at the end of August and confessed to the crime, leading them to the park where they had buried a black bag that eventually contained Farah's body. However, it is believed that the black bag was unearthed and moved to another location shortly after Linda's confession. In September 2005, Kathleen Mulhall fled to England. In December 2005, Linda and Charlotte were arrested and charged with murder. Shortly afterward, their biological father, John, who was looking after the 4 children on his own, died. It is believed that he had nothing to do with the crime. Linda and Charlotte's trial began in October 2006, with Linda facing a charge of manslaughter and Charlotte charged with attempted murder. During the trial, both women claimed they acted in self-defense, maintained their innocence, and stated that they were trying to protect their mother. After a brief deliberation, the jury found Charlotte Mulhall and Linda Mulhall guilty. The judge sentenced Linda to 15 years in prison, while Charlotte received a life sentence. It was reported that both sisters had exhibited poor behavior while incarcerated in a women's prison in Dublin. One day, Linda injured her hand and spent several weeks in the hospital. Charlotte attracted media attention after a photograph was released of Charlotte attacking a male prisoner. The incident led to increased security measures at all prisons in Ireland, and Charlotte was subsequently transferred to a higher security facility in Limerick. Kathleen Mulhall's story began when she fled Ireland in September 2005 and assumed a new identity in the UK, however. In January 2008, a reporter discovered her location and reported her to the police. As a result, Kathleen was forced to return to Ireland, where she faced numerous charges. She confessed to helping her daughters dispose of their bodies and clean their apartment. In May 2009, Kathleen was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released after serving only 2 years. After her release in October 2011, she returned to the UK and moved in with her son, James. At that time, James's family consisted of his 6 children and the 4 children of his sister, Linda. He adopted Linda's children after she was arrested. After Kathleen arrived, tensions rose between James and his live-in girlfriend, eventually leading to an incident in which he assaulted her and was subsequently imprisoned. Kathleen later suffered severe kidney failure and underwent an organ transplant in Dublin. She now lives in her hometown, where she continues to receive treatment. Linda was released early from her sentence that same year. She now lives with her children and her new partner. Linda does not give interviews to journalists. In a recent statement to the media, she said, "She have served my sentence. Let she live in peace after all. This is she personal life, and it is none of your." Since March 20th, 2023, Charlotte has been allowed to leave prison for 1 day. Under close supervision by guards, she may soon be eligible for parole. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of John Allen Chow. We'll embark on a journey to the enigmatic North Sentinel Island in the Andaman Islands, India, to explore the lives of the Sentinelese. The island's inhabitants, they live in complete isolation from the modern world, maintaining a hunter-gatherer lifestyle that dates back tens of thousands of years. Known for their hostility towards outsiders, their language, beliefs, and social structure remain largely unknown, making them a symbol of prehistoric isolation. Tourism has been rapidly developing on the Andaman Islands, attracting visitors from around the world to experience its breathtaking natural beauty. Travelers come to admire the majestic mangrove forests, stroll through lush, tropical jungles, relax on pristine sandy beaches, and savor fresh local cuisine. However, let's turn our focus to North Sentinel Island. This isolated island spans nearly 60 square kilometers and has a roughly circular, shield-like shape. It typically enjoys bright sunshine, but also experiences seasonal winds and monsoons. Satellite images reveal that the island is surrounded by coral reefs and sandy beaches. Almost the entire island, apart from the coastline, is covered by dense tropical forest. Despite thousands of satellite images being taken, the thick forest canopy conceals anything beneath it. Adding to the island's enduring mystery, it is important to note that visiting North Sentinel Island has been strictly prohibited since 1956 under the Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Act for the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It is illegal to approach the island. A restricted zone of 8 kilometers has been established around it. The Indian Coast Guard regularly patrols the surrounding waters, and anyone attempting to enter the island faces severe penalties, including heavy fines and imprisonment. Additionally, visiting many nearby islands also requires official permits. The Sentinelese remain isolated, fiercely defending their territory despite efforts to make contact. Nearly all attempts have failed. If someone were stranded on the island, Indian authorities would not intervene. Their population is estimated between 80 to 150 individuals. As no official count has been made, they rely on a diet of wild boar, fish, shellfish, and plants, avoiding contact with the outside world and fishing only within their lagoon. They remain within their reefs, fishing only in their lagoons, while they use canoes. These are limited to shallow waters, where they propel themselves forward with long poles that reach the seabed. So, the Sentinelese are believed to be unable to move in deep waters. As they have not developed the use of oars, physically, they are distinctive, broad, muscular, and relatively short. With an average height of about 1.6 meters, none of them are obese. Interestingly, the Sentinelese place high value on metal during their rare interactions with the outside world. They have been seen using arrows with metal tips in 1974. They took aluminum cookware left behind by the National Geographic Society. The first recorded observation of the Sentinelese occurred in 1771, when Indian sailors passing by noticed a fire on the island's shore. Almost a century later, in 1867, an Indian merchant ship ran aground on one of the island's reefs. The crew reached the shore in search of food and water, but after 3 days, they were attacked by a group of islanders. At the time, no one knew anything about the Sentinelese. In the end, the crew was rescued by a naval team in their rush to escape. The sailors abandoned the damaged vessel and fled to safety in January 1880. British naval officer Maurice Vidal Portman led an expedition to North Sentinel Island to establish contact with the indigenous people. However, when his team arrived, they could not find any Sentinelese, as the inhabitants had seemingly hidden out of fear. The team followed trails that led to an abandoned village, but no one was there. After several days of fruitless searching, they finding abandoned villages and roads, his team captured 6 people, including an elderly man, a woman, and 4 children. The man and woman died of disease shortly after their arrival in Port Blair, and the children also began to fall ill. Portman hastily sent the children back to North Sentinel Island with a large supply of gifts in an attempt to establish friendly relations. Portman visited the island again in 1883, 1885, and 1887, but all were unsuccessful. In 1896, a prisoner escaped from the Great Andaman Island detention camp on a makeshift raft and drifted to North Sentinel Beach. His body was discovered by a search party a few days later with multiple arrow wounds and a cut throat. On August 2, 1981, the MV Primrose, carrying a large cargo of chicken feed from Bangladesh to Australia, ran aground in rough seas near North Sentinel Island, trapping its small crew. After several days, the captain sent a distress signal, reporting that more than 50 armed islanders were preparing boats to approach the ship. However, heavy waves prevented the islanders from reaching the vessel, and their arrows were deflected. The 31-member crew had to stay vigilant, armed with axes, pipes, and flare weapons. Nearly a week later, the crew was evacuated by a civilian helicopter chartered by the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation with the assistance of the Indian Navy. After the evacuation, the Sentinelese scavenged the abandoned shipwrecks for iron to use in making weapons. Muhammad, a scrap metal dealer contracted by the government to dismantle the Primrose, recorded friendly exchanges of fruit and small pieces of metal with the Sentinelese, who often approached the wreck at low tide. 2 days later, in the early morning, 3 Sentinelese canoes, carrying about a dozen men, approached the Primrose. Initially apprehensive, the crew threw bananas to the islanders in an attempt to attract them and reduce the possibility of conflict over the next 18 months. The Sentinelese regularly visited the crew while they continued salvage work on the abandoned ship. In 1991, the first instances of peaceful contact with the Sentinelese were recorded during 2 regular expeditions conducted by an Indian anthropological team, which included representatives from various government agencies, as well as anthropologist Madhumala Chattopadhyay. This marked the first time a woman on an expedition made contact with the Sentinelese during the visit on January 4, 1991. The Sentinelese initially approached the team unarmed. They accepted the coconuts offered to them, but retreated when the team signaled for them to come closer. The team returned to the main ship. MV Tarmugli and later returned to the island in the afternoon, where they found at least 24 Sentinelese on the beach. One of the men aimed a bow and arrow at the team, but a woman pushed the arrow down, prompting the man to bury his weapon in the sand for the first time. The Sentinelese approached the boats quite closely. The tribal welfare director then personally handed over 5 bags of coconuts in 1995. The Indian government decided not to forcibly contact or assimilate the Sentinelese into modern civilization. By 1996, all visits to North Sentinel Island were completely stopped. In 2004, a massive tsunami devastated the Indian Ocean region, displacing hundreds of thousands of people and claiming many lives. This natural disaster also significantly affected North Sentinel Island. Tectonic activity caused the island and nearby seabed to rise by almost 2 meters. This uplift exposed the surrounding coral reef, which dried out and eventually died. These changes are visible in satellite images starting in 2004. Following the tsunami, an Indian helicopter flew over the island to check if the Sentinelese needed assistance. The islanders, however, emerged and aimed their arrows at the helicopter, clearly signaling they wanted no contact. In 2018, John Allen Chow, a Christian missionary, attempted to visit North Sentinel Island. Believing he was uniquely capable of conquering its isolation, John was born on December 18, 1991, in Scottsboro, Alabama. His father, Patrick Chow, a Chinese-American psychiatrist, while his mother, Linda Adams Chow, was an organizer for Chi Alpha. John grew up in a warm and loving family with an older brother and sister. Both of his parents were devout Christians, contributing to their successful academic careers. While his siblings pursued college and careers in medicine, John chose a different path. He developed a strong passion for Christianity and travel. John loved outdoor activities and often went hiking with friends. From a young age, he dreamed of living on an uninhabited island, combining his passion for adventure and his faith. He decided to become a missionary. He traveled extensively, meeting people and spreading the Christian faith. At the age of 17, he learned about the isolated North Sentinel Island and its inhabitants. John believed he could help the Sentinelese by introducing them to Christianity and connecting them with God. In 2015, John took his first trip to the Andaman Islands. Although he avoided getting too close to North Sentinel Island, he began studying the area, building connection, and preparing for a future mission. He returned home without visiting the island he had dreamed of, but resolved to go back. By 2016, John was living in California, working as a guide, and traveling across the United States. Next year, he also organized a missionary training camp to teach others how to engage with remote tribes. John became deeply fixated on North Sentinel Island and frequently discussed it with friends and family. He shared his plans to visit the island. John believed it was his divine mission to tell the Sentinelese about God and bring light to their dark world. In October 2018, John traveled to Port Blair to prepare for his trip to the island. He created picture cards for communication, collected gifts for the islanders, and bought medical supplies and other essential items to prioritize the safety of the Sentinelese to minimize health risks. He vaccinated himself against common viruses and self-quarantined for 11 days. Despite efforts, John could not secure official permission, making his trip illegal under Indian law. Determined to proceed, he approached local fishermen and eventually convinced 3 of them to take him close to the island for $400 late on the night of November 14, 2018. The fishermen secretly took John aboard their motorboat and set out to sea. Their destination was about 60 miles away. By early morning on November 15, they reached the waters near North Sentinel Island. Despite the fishermen's warnings, John left the boat, got into his canoe, and paddled alone toward the shore. As he approached, the Sentinelese noticed him while he was still in the water. They shouted in their language, clearly expressing their displeasure at the unexpected visitor. The islanders exchanged looks and then decided to defend their territory. They aimed their arrows at John, who panicked and quickly retreated to his canoe, paddling as fast as he could. He returned to the motorboat, narrowly escaping harm. Although terrified by the experience, John was deeply disappointed. His mission had failed, and all his efforts felt futile. The next day, John decided to return to the island. As he paddled toward the shore, he heard the cries of the islanders and the sound of drums. Soon, he noticed a man standing on a high coral reef. The man, his chest painted white, said something to John. In an attempt to communicate, John repeated the man's words and sang a prayer in response. The islander laughed loudly. Suddenly, more sentinelese appeared on the shore. Gathering into a crowd, John offered them gifts, but two men dragged his canoe into the dense forest. At one point, a young islander aimed an arrow directly at him, panicking. John held up his Bible. The arrow struck the Bible, sparing him, startled and afraid. John fled into the water. He swam as fast as he could. Once he could no longer touch the sea floor. After swimming about a mile, he reached the fisherman's boat that had brought him to the island and managed to escape to safety. Disheartened, that day, he wrote in his journal, "Lord, is this island Satan's last stronghold, where none have heard or even had the chance to hear your name? The eternal lives of this tribe is at hand, and I think it's worthwhile to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God. If I get killed, don't retrieve my body." Early on the morning of November 17, John set out once more for the wild island, this time in a motorboat with the fishermen. Before switching to his canoe, he wrote in his journal, "I hope this is not my last entry, but if it is, glory to God." Wearing only black shorts, John climbed into his canoe and paddled alone toward North Sentinel Island. For the third time, the fishermen stayed in the motorboat at sea with John's belongings, waiting for him until the afternoon. When John failed to return, they left and went home the following day. The fishermen returned to the island to observe the shoreline from a distance and search for John. They noticed something unusual on the shore. As they looked closer, they realized it was a motionless man resembling John, dressed in black shorts. While they watched, the sentinelese came on, dragged the body off the beach, and disappeared into the jungle. Frightened, the fishermen returned to Port Blair and informed John's family of his death. John's parents, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances were heartbroken. Though they understood the drastic decision he had made in pursuit of his missionary work, the authorities now faced two key questions: what steps to take next, and whether to attempt retrieving John's body to return it to his homeland. Upon examining John's journal, the police discovered an entry where he had written, "If it happens that I am killed, I ask that my body not be taken from the island." 3 days after John's death, his family shared a post on social network announcing that John had died in India while engaging with the Sentinelese tribe on the Andaman Islands. Part of their message read, "We forgive those reportedly responsible for his death. He went to them willingly, and no one should face prosecution because of his actions." The authorities ultimately decided not to file any criminal charges. The fishermen who had transported John to the remote island were released on bail, despite several attempts by the Indian police to recover John's body. The operation was deemed too dangerous, and officials chose not to proceed. To this day, John's death has not been officially confirmed. His mother, Linda, continues to believe that her son is still alive and living on the island. She tells the media that John will return one day and share the truth himself. Meanwhile, his father, Patrick, holds the missionary organization responsible for John's death, accusing them of pressuring his son into taking such extreme risks and encouraging him to visit the perilous island. The future of the Sentinelese remains uncertain. Will they be able to preserve their way of life on their secluded island? In a way, their independence from the challenges of modern life could even inspire a sense of admiration. Hello again. True crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. Stephanie Flores Ramirez was born on July 22, 1988, to Ricardo Flores and Mari Elena Ramirez. She was a kind and easygoing child. Her family was quite wealthy. Her father was involved in the auto racing industry and was building a successful political career. Stephanie grew up in a prestigious family. Her 4 brothers were all from the upper class and had access to the best education. Stephanie excelled in school, earning the admiration and respect of her teachers and classmates. In 2008, at the age of 20, Stephanie enrolled at the University of San Martin de Porres to study business administration. By 2010, as a third-year student, she had many great ideas and hopes for her future. Despite her innocent appearance and excellent academic performance, Stephanie knew how to enjoy life. With a lot of money at her disposal, she frequented the best nightclubs and casinos in the country. On the night of May 30, 2010, at a casino called Atlantic City, Stephanie met a mysterious man named Joran van der Sloot at around 3 a.m. She sat down at the poker table next to him, and they were instantly attracted to each other, although they came from different countries. They both spoke fluent English and quickly found common ground. Stephanie was drawn to Joran's confidence and easygoing demeanor, while he was captivated by her beauty and smile. During their conversation, Stephanie asked Joran how he came to Lima. He said he was on vacation to escape some personal troubles. At that time, Stephanie had no idea that his troubles were related to the murder of a woman. Joran deceived her by claiming that he was the son of a wealthy lawyer and judge. This made Stephanie feel safe, as she believed that someone from a wealthy family like hers could not be dangerous. They talked at the poker table late into the night. Stephanie was an experienced gambler, knowing how to assess odds and calculate how to win money. Just a few days earlier, she had won $10 in a game after hours of chatting. They had consumed a considerable amount of alcohol. What started as a casual conversation gradually turned into flirting. Eventually, Joran invited Stephanie to spend the night with him, and to her surprise, she agreed. They went to a hotel in the Miraflores area, where Joran rented a room. There are differing accounts of whether the pair became intimate. Some say they had an intimate encounter, while others claim that Stephanie simply went to his room to continue playing online poker. The details of that night are somewhat unclear, however. It is confirmed that at some point, Stephanie accessed Joran's laptop. Stephanie later learned of Joran's connection to Natalie Holloway's death. She had been lured into a dangerous situation, and now she was trapped with a criminal. Stephanie tried to escape, but was unable to. When Joran realized she had discovered his secret, he became furious. A struggle ensued. He hit Stephanie in the nose with a crowbar, causing her to bleed mercilessly. Joran overpowered her and began strangling her. He then continued to attack her until she stopped breathing. When morning came, Stephanie still hadn't returned home. Her father, Ricardo, grew increasingly worried as time passed. He knew his daughter always came home, which made him fear that something was wrong. He contacted his son, Enrique, for help in finding Stephanie. They called Stephanie's co-workers, but when they found nothing, they contacted the police to report her missing. Ricardo discovered that his daughter had been gambling the night before. Peruvian police then went to Atlantic City to investigate further. There, they reviewed surveillance camera footage of Stephanie playing poker and drinking. During the night, she met a tall young man. The police quickly identified him and obtained his national identification number. From that point on, Joran van der Sloot became the prime suspect in Stephanie's disappearance. It was discovered that the two had left the casino together around 5 a.m. that morning, although their exact destination was initially unclear. It was noted that they were returning to the hotel where Joran was staying. The footage showed the pair entering his hotel room. Hours later, Joran left the room alone, but returned with 2 cups of coffee and a loaf of bread. 3 hours after they entered, Joran left the room again, still alone. As he left, He informed a hotel employee that Stephanie was still in the room, but asked that she not be disturbed as she was only sleeping. On June 2, 3 days after Stephanie's death, and after Joran had checked out, a hotel employee discovered her body in room 309. Police found a tennis racket in the room, believed to be the weapon used in the attack. After verifying the name associated with the room, police confirmed that it was Joran van der Sloot. After leaving the hotel, he left the TV on full volume, possibly creating the illusion that someone was still inside. Police were unable to determine where he went after the crime. In an effort to quickly identify Joran, the police released his information and photo to all media outlets. In further investigation, police learned that Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, into a wealthy family. He has 2 older brothers, his mother is an art teacher, and his father has a well-paying job that provides for the family. They live a comfortable life. Enjoying traveling, Joran attends a local international school, where he is a diligent student. He is tall, attractive, and athletic, participating in football and tennis while regularly practicing with his father. Despite doing well in school, Joran was a spoiled brat and a habitual liar. In contrast to his calm older brothers, he displayed arrogant and flamboyant behavior, often sneaking out at night to go to casinos. In 2005, he met an American girl named Natalie Holloway. As their relationship developed, Joran expressed a desire to be intimate with her. When Natalie refused, he became violent and kicked her in the head when she was unconscious. He abused her to cover up his crime. He murdered her. The case of Natalie's disappearance and Joran's involvement attracted international media attention. Maintaining public interest for a decade, Joran was the prime suspect from the beginning. But due to numerous legal issues, he could not be convicted despite repeated interrogations and detentions. How did Joran get to Lima? And where did he get the money for the trip? In fact, he blackmailed Natalie's family, promising to reveal the location of their daughter's body in exchange for cash. After receiving a portion of the money, Joran fled to Lima to pursue his gambling ventures there. At a casino in Atlantic City, he met his second victim, Stephanie, whom he killed on the 5th anniversary of Natalie's death. Joran became the prime suspect in the case, leading to his placement on Interpol's wanted list. Police in neighboring countries were informed of the situation. His whereabouts were soon traced when he entered Chile via the Chacaluta border. Police confirmed that he was in Chile. After tracing him, he was later found after taking a taxi in Vina del Mar, a coastal city. Chilean police arrested him as he was walking toward Santiago. Joran was immediately taken into custody, and the bloodied clothing of the victim, Stephanie, was found in his possession. Initially, Joran denied any involvement in her death, claiming that armed robbers had attacked them in their hotel room. He alleged that when Stephanie refused to cooperate, they killed her. This explanation was seen as an attempt to evade responsibility. On July 5, after Joran was deported to Peru, an official investigation began. He was questioned, and after several days of police interrogation, he realized he had no way out and confessed to the crime. In his written statement, he detailed the events that took place that night. He claimed that he had left the hotel to buy coffee and bread, but when he returned, he discovered that Stephanie was using his computer and that she knew he was involved in Natalie's death. According to Joran, when he tried to explain with Stephanie, she hit him and ran toward the door. He then stopped her. He insisted that he never intended to kill her. However, when she invaded his privacy without permission, he became angry, lost control, and ultimately took Stephanie's life. Joran claimed that he drank coffee laced with an illegal pill, then packed his things and left the hotel. Subsequent toxicology tests showed no trace of any pills in his system, suggesting that he may have used this strategy to reduce his sentence in Peru. Crimes committed under the influence of illegal substances often result in lighter sentences, and it appears that Joran's attorneys were aware of this and sought to exploit it, Joran was subsequently arrested on charges of robbery and first-degree murder. Given the severity of Joran's actions and the wealth of his family, the judge denied his request for bail on the morning of the trial. An angry crowd gathered outside the courthouse, expressing their outrage by throwing fruit and eggs at Joran as he was escorted inside. Joran had previously been held in a maximum security prison in South America, known for its harsh conditions. Where he was constantly monitored, he was offered a chance to be transferred to a prison in Aruba if he revealed the location of Natalie's body. But he refused the offer. Joran's attorneys have argued that Joran lost control during the attack on Stephanie because she took his laptop without permission. If the judge had accepted this argument, Joran could have faced a lighter sentence of only 3 to 5 years in prison, and with good behavior, he might have been released after 20 months. However, these efforts have failed. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to the murder and robbery of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison and ordered to pay $75 to Stephanie's family. This marked the end of Stephanie's case. However, Joran's criminal story is not over yet. He was recently extradited to the United States to face charges of extorting Natalie's parents. Concerned that his sentence could be longer than life, he decided to plead guilty. Natalie Holloway's case took a turn when Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to extortion and wire fraud. The plea added 20 years to his sentence, which he would have to serve after his release from a Peruvian prison. Although Joran confessed to killing Natalie, he was not punished for that crime. Instead, he was sentenced to a total of 28 years in a Peruvian prison. After serving his sentence, he was transferred to a U.S. prison to serve an additional 20 years for extorting Natalie's family. During this time, little was known about what happened. Notably, Joran's father, who had supported him, died of a heart attack. Although Joran faced a total of 48 years in prison, many felt that this punishment was insufficient given his cruelty. Stephanie and Natalie lived short but vibrant lives, filled with love and the promise of a bright future. Their families and friends are devastated by the loss of their beautiful daughters, sisters, and girlfriends. It is heartbreaking to know that their lives were taken by a criminal with no compassion. If Joran had been incarcerated sooner, with enough evidence against him, Stephanie might still be alive today. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Daniel LaPlante. In 1986, Frank Bowen, with his 2 daughters, Tina Bowen and Karen Bowen, experienced a series of terrifying events at their home in Townsend, Massachusetts. The girls initially believed that the house was haunted when strange phenomena began to occur, such as furniture being shuffled, strange noises coming from the walls, and threatening words written on mirrors and walls in a red material that looked like blood. These events left the family in extreme fear. Frank Bowen initially thought that his daughters were imagining things or playing a prank, but all doubts disappeared when he was faced with the terrifying truth. The person behind these bizarre events was Daniel LaPlante, a 16-year-old boy who lived nearby. In addition to trying to scare the Bowen family, Daniel secretly lived in their house for about 2 months. Taking refuge in the walls and narrow spaces between rooms, Daniel used secret passageways in the house to spy on and manipulate the family. The truth was discovered when Mr. Frank found Daniel in the house, confronting him with a weapon in his hand. Police later determined that Daniel had cut holes in the walls to move around undetected, turning the Frank home into a hiding place. Daniel LaPlante, often referred to as Danny, was born on May 15, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. He grew up with his parents and 2 brothers, but his childhood was far from happy. Daniel endured various forms of abuse from his father, including physical, emotional, and abuse. After cutting ties with his father, Daniel began living with another man, who also treated him cruelly. Their home was an unhealthy environment, filthy and cluttered with garbage, with a yard full of trash and stray animals roaming freely. This atmosphere contributed to Daniel's growing disillusionment with life. He became rebellious, and his teachers frequently complained about his behavior. What began as troubling behavior eventually escalated into self-destructive tendencies. Daniel struggled socially, performed poorly in school, and was described by his classmates as strange, unhygienic, and unpleasant. Most avoided him because of his appearance and behavior, concerned by his actions. The school referred Daniel to a psychiatrist for help during their sessions. It was discovered that Daniel had dyslexia and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. While the psychiatrist initially appeared to want to help, he instead exploited Daniel's vulnerabilities. Over the course of a year, the psychiatrist coerced Daniel into an abuse relationship, further compounding the trauma he had already endured throughout his life. By 1986, as a teenager, desperate to escape his life of torment, Abuse began committing petty thefts in his neighbors' homes. Initially, he focused on stealing specific items, but over time, he shifted his focus to instilling fear in the residents. He started leaving cryptic, unsettling messages, rearranging household items to confuse the homeowners, and scattering crumbs and food stains throughout the houses. One of the homes he targeted belonged to the Bowen family. The Bowen family lived in Townsend, Massachusetts. In the same county as Daniel, the household consisted of Frank and his 2 daughters. The girl's mother had recently passed away from cancer, leaving the family grief-stricken and struggling to adjust to their drastically changed lives. When Daniel broke into their home, he noticed the family portraits, which radiated a sense of closeness and warmth. This enraged Daniel, who felt deeply unhappy with his own life. To him, such a family seemed like an impossible dream. It was then that he devised a sinister plan. Toward the end of 1986, one evening, Tina Bowen received an anonymous call from a young man who introduced himself as Daniel LaPlante. When Tina asked how he had gotten her phone number, Daniel claimed he attended the same school as her and had obtained it through a mutual friend. Curious, Tina asked if they had met before, and Daniel provided a false description of himself to spark her interest. He claimed to have bright blonde hair, an athletic build, and said he lived in her neighborhood. During their conversations, which continued for about a week, Daniel was very polite and charming, successfully gaining Tina's trust. After much persuasion, Daniel convinced Tina to go on a date with him. He offered to pick her up from her home, and his imagined charm seemed to win her over. However, when the big evening arrived, Daniel made no effort to clean up his appearance. When he showed up at the Bowen house and rang the doorbell, Tina immediately realized that everything he had claimed on the phone was untrue. As she opened the door, she saw that Daniel looked nothing like his description. His clothes were dirty, his physique was far from athletic, and his hair was dark instead of blonde. Despite her disappointment, Tina felt there might still be some trace of the charming man she had spoken with beneath it all. So, she decided to give him a chance. While they were walking together, Tina shared with Daniel that her mother had recently passed away from cancer. Instead of offering comfort, Daniel began asking her unsettling questions about her mother's appearance after death, what it was like to witness death up close, and the extent of her mother's suffering before she passed. The conversation was so unusual and inappropriate that it felt nothing like the casual evening chats Tina was used to. An hour into the date, Tina didn't leave, though she found the entire experience deeply strange and upsetting. She had never encountered someone so fixated on her mother's death, and Daniel's blunt, insensitive questions showed no regard for the pain she and her family had endured. This left she feeling profoundly sad. Tina later expressed her sadness to her younger sister, saying how much she missed their mother and how desperately she wished to speak with her again. One evening, while home alone, Tina and her sister decided to try contacting their mother's spirit using a Ouija board. They went down to the basement and, with little expectation that it would work, began the ritual. However, their efforts were unsuccessful, when they heard their father returning from work. The sisters quickly hid the Ouija board and went back to their room. Later that night, just after midnight, Tina and Karen were startled awake by a series of knocks on their bedroom wall. Excited, the sisters believed it was their mother attempting to communicate with them. They felt their spiritualism session had not been in vain. When they asked directly if it was truly their mother, a loud knock sounded on the wall, which the girls took as a definite yes. For several nights, strange events continued to occur, but only Tina and Karen were aware of them. However, when they tried to show their father the supernatural activity, nothing happened. It all began with faint knocks on the walls, but soon objects started disappearing. Items left on the table were found scattered on the floor the next day. The girls noticed furniture moving on its own, and food and drinks vanishing mysteriously. These occurrences unsettled them, and they began doubting that it was their mother trying to communicate. After all, their mom wouldn't frighten them like this. When the girls explained everything to Frank, he dismissed their claims. He believed the so-called supernatural events were just the girls acting out. Frank assumed Tina and Karen were seeking attention and tried to remain patient, convinced they would eventually overcome their pain. However, as time went on, Tina and Karen became increasingly terrified of their own home. The knocks on the walls and other strange happenings were driving them to the brink. Still, Frank refused to believe Tina and Karen. In desperation, Tina decided to confront the spirit directly. Now, she's certain it wasn't their late mother. Tina grabbed a knife from the kitchen and, along with Karen, went down to the basement. On one of the walls, they found a message written in red letters, which they immediately assumed was blood. The message read, "I am in your room. Find me." Terrified, Tina and Karen ran to the neighbor's house. Desperate to escape the torment they believed was caused by the spirit they had summoned, Tina and Karen anxiously waited for their father to return home from work. When Frank arrived, he immediately noticed the chaos upon seeing the message on the basement wall. He quickly realized it was written in tomato sauce. Furious, he lashed out at his daughters, scolding them for going too far and damaging their own home. He told them they needed a healthier way to deal with their pain, and even threatened to send Tina and Karen to a psychotherapist after this unsettling incident. Everything seemed to go back to normal. The supernatural events stopped, and the family began to relax. Life resumed its usual peaceful rhythm. The girls behaved calmly, and Frank continued his work as if nothing had happened. However, one day, a knock on the wall signaled the ghost's return. Tina and Karen, consumed by fear, returned to the basement, where all their troubles had begun. Suddenly, they heard another loud knock from upstairs. Panicked, they ran to Tina's bedroom, only to find a chilling message written in large red letters on the wall. "I'm back. Find me if you can." Tina grabbed her sister's hand, and they fled the house, seeking help from their neighbor, alarmed by the sisters' story and their state. The neighbor promptly called Frank to inform him of what was happening. When Frank heard that his daughters were involved in another disturbing incident, he rushed home to address the situation. Convinced his daughters' actions were escalating, he decided to get to the bottom of it. Upon arriving at the neighbor's house, Frank questioned Tina and Karen about the events. Shaking with fear, they said everything, including the unsettling message they had discovered. Determined to put an end to their fears, Frank decided to go back to the house alone to investigate. As he stepped inside, Frank was met with chaos. The entire house was in disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor. He immediately realized this mess was far beyond what his daughters could have caused. When he entered Tina's bedroom, he found the same disturbing message the girls had described earlier, and now an additional chilling note was scrawled beneath it. "Marry me, confused and uneasy." Frank felt something was terribly wrong. A shiver ran down his spine as he sensed a presence behind him. Turning around, his heart sank. In the corner of the room stood a young man. The man was dressed in Frank's late wife's wedding dress and a blonde wig. Even more horrifying, he was holding an axe. Though shaken to his core, Frank quickly realized one thing. This was no ghost. Frank chased the intruder until this man fled and disappeared from sight immediately afterward. He called the police. Investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a hidden space behind a closet in one of the rooms. Inside the wall, they found a small door leading to an underground cavity or passageway between the house's walls, large enough for someone to move through. When a police officer entered the hidden area, they found Daniel curled up in a ball in one corner. Daniel was arrested, with Frank identifies him as the man in the wedding dress who threatened Frank with an axe. Later, authorities uncovered more troubling details about the incident. Tina confided in her father about an unsettling date she had gone on with Daniel a few months earlier. Investigators determined that Daniel had used the hidden passageways to torment Tina and Karen inside the space. Police found a sleeping bag, clothing belonging to the family, and leftover food. The most disturbing discovery, however, was that the secret space connected to every room in the house. This allowed Daniel to move through the walls undetected, spy on the family, and communicate with the girls through the distinct knocking sounds that had terrified them at the time of his arrest. 16-year-old Daniel was sent to a juvenile facility when he turned 17. Court documents were filed to begin trying his case as an adult. He faced multiple charges, including robbery, burglary, and property damage. In October 1987, Daniel was released on bail after his mother paid nearly $10 for his release after returning to his mother and stepfather's home. Daniel was instructed to stay out of trouble and await his court date on December 11, 1987. However, he ignored these instructions and resumed burglarizing nearby homes. During one of these break-ins, he found a weapon, which he took with him in November. His stepfather discovered the weapon hidden in a laundry basket when confronted. Daniel lied and refused to reveal where he had obtained the weapon, although his stepfather confiscated it. It was unclear whether Daniel had access to another one. On December 1, 1987, Daniel walked approximately 2 kilometers to reach the large, comfortable mansion of the Gustafson family. The family consisted of 33-year-old Priscilla, her husband Andrew, their 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, and Priscilla is pregnant with their 3rd child. The Gustafson family were a close-knit family dedicated to helping others. Andrew worked as a lawyer and was often away from home, while Priscilla worked at a kindergarten, sang in a choir, and actively participated in their church. On that tragic day, when Daniel broke into their home, only Priscilla and William were there. At this time, Abigail was still at school. He overpowered Priscilla, dragged her into the bedroom, and assaulted her. Afterwards, he suffocated her with a pillow to muffle the sound, and then attacked her twice in the head. Once Priscilla was dead, Daniel turned his attention to William. He carried the boy to a filled bathtub on the 2nd floor and drowned him. Shortly after Abigail arrived home from school, Daniel immediately grabbed Abigail, took her to the bathtub on the 1st floor, and drowned her in it. Just like William, when Andrew arrived at the house around 6 p.m., he immediately sensed something was wrong. The children were not playing as they usually did, and his wife did not come to greet him in the hallway when he called out for Priscilla. There was no response. Concerned, Andrew went to the bedroom, where he discovered a horrifying scene. Priscilla was lying lifeless in an unnatural position, with bloodstains all around. In shock, Andrew called the police right away. He could not even search the house to find the children when the investigators arrived. They found Andrew in such a state of shock that he was unable to think clearly during their search of the house. The police discovered the bodies of the children. Among the evidence collected were 2 spent cartridges from a weapon, strands of the attacker's hair on the bed and on Priscilla's body, an open beer can, and shoe prints near the entrance. Suspicion quickly fell on Daniel, a recently paroled young man who lived near the Gustafson home. He was known for his skill in breaking into nearby houses, which made him a prime suspect. While investigators were searching for him, Daniel was at the city library when questioned about his whereabouts on December 1. He claimed he had been at a family birthday party. He denied any involvement in the case of the Gustafson family and expressed sorrow over what had occurred. The police initially appeared to believe his story, but later, they visited Daniel's home with additional questions and a search warrant. When Daniel was sitting on the porch, spotted the police car. He immediately realized they were there for him, so he fled and hid in the woods. Daniel's actions confirmed the investigators' suspicions were right, and them to search Daniel's house inside. They discovered several shoe soles that matched the footprints found near the Gustafson home. They also found fibers that appeared to be connected to the crime. A sock with saliva stains likely used to gag Priscilla. A .22 caliber shell casing similar to one found at the crime scene, and a cordless phone stolen from the Gustafson home. Additionally, the Daniel family's car was examined. They revealing weapon in the glove compartment. Police quickly called for reinforcements to search for Daniel, the main suspect in the case of the Gustafson family. Over 50 officers participated in the search, aided by helicopters and sniffer dogs that thoroughly combed the forest. A crucial tip came from an emergency call. The caller revealed that Daniel had threatened her with a gun and forced her to drive him away in her truck. Thankfully, she managed to escape. This information helped investigators identify the model of the car Daniel used to flee on the run. He committed several additional robberies, leaving witnesses at the scenes who later reported him to the police. Daniel LaPlante was arrested on December 3, 1987, at 6:03 p.m. while trying to hide behind a garbage can in Ayers Town at the time of his arrest. He was armed and had committed several crimes while evading capture. Daniel's trial began in October 1988, when he was 18 years old, although most of his crimes occurred when he was a minor. The judge decided to try him as an adult. Daniel pleaded not guilty. Despite strong evidence against him, Daniel's defense claimed he was mentally unfit to stand trial, but a psychiatric evaluation determined that he could understand right from wrong and was fit for trial. The jury found Daniel LaPlante guilty of murdering the Gustafson family and sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole in 1993. Daniel attempted to appeal his sentence, arguing that the search warrant for his home was issued improperly, but he was unsuccessful. In 2000, Daniel requested a transfer to another prison due to safety concerns after receiving threats from fellow inmates, and this request was approved. Then, in 2013, Daniel expressed dissatisfaction with not being allowed to practice his religion freely because his rituals would have required ingredients like blood and banned substance. In 2017, Daniel submitted a petition seeking a reduced sentence, claiming he was under 18 when he committed the crimes, so he should not be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He aimed to serve just 1 life sentence instead of 3 consecutive ones. However, his request was denied because he was required to serve time for each life he had ruined. His statement to the judge was as follows: "I cannot adequately express the weight of my actions. I have taken the lives of 3 innocent people because of my choices. A 5-year-old boy will never celebrate his 6th birthday, and 7-year-old girls will never turn 8. Their mother will not have a 3rd child, and I have robbed an unborn baby of its first breath. This woman may never hear the words, 'I love you' again to my family. I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused. My remorse is profound and heartfelt." In 2019, Daniel LaPlante applied for parole again, but the authorities was decided that his request would not be reviewed until 2032. Many believe that Daniel lacks the capacity for remorse or any genuine feelings, and they see him as someone who is capable of psychological torment and brutal killings. This raises concerns that if he is released, he may seek out new victims.